Spoilers. Spoiler warning here. Spoilers. Spoilers. Walking Dead spoilers, everyone. Spoiler warning. I'm also going to spoil a couple of other games. Here they are. Check them out. Very nice. Very cool. Do y'all remember when we got back-to-back daddy games in the early 2010s? Games where the story and gameplay revolve around the protection of another character, sometimes assistance to the gameplay, sometimes the moral compass of the story. We had The Last of Us and BioShock in the same year, but it wouldn't be too long before God of War and Witcher 3 would come out with a similar idea. God of War and The Last of Us, in particular, have become two of the most critically acclaimed, commercially successful, and just straight up expensive IPs to come out of the genre, with The Last of Us even making its way to mass audiences through its television series on HBO. With the passing of time, these two games have become the quintessential daddy games. But before any of these had a chance to shine, The Walking Dead swooped in and set the standard for the daddy game. Telltale, the developers of the game, made the genius decision to develop an original story set in the Walking Dead universe, one that focuses entirely on the relationship between its two protagonists, Lee and Clementine. The resulting combination paved the way for Telltale to become a rock star among the gaming community, with newer and more exciting IP continuously churning out with the passage of time. All was not well with Telltale though, and just to keep things brief, the company failed to live up to The Walking Dead's hype over the course of its lifetime, and eventually closed its doors in 2018, right as the series concluded. The Telltale name still exists, but with only a skeleton crew to manage the company, they're hardly the household name they were back in the day. What's crazy about The Walking Dead though, especially when you compare it to other franchises in the Telltale library, is that it managed to shit out 4 seasons of the thing. While Lee's at the center of that first game, Clementine goes on to become the protagonist in all other subsequent seasons, which begs the question, what happened to this franchise? Where did things go wrong? Where did things go right? Did these later seasons live up to that first one? And what happens to Clementine? I don't want anything bad to happen to her, but there's 4 games in this bitch, and the 4th season's called the final season, so, does she survive it? All of these dumbass questions and more as I take us through the various seasons in The Walking Dead, dissecting what works and what doesn't, and the primary focus being the game's story. Because even though these are video games, gameplay really does come second here, to the game's benefit.
Look, I don't know what happened, but I'll look after you until then.
The Walking Dead starts out on the back of a police car as you're escorted outside the city of Atlanta, Georgia. Lee Everett is a history teacher and convicted felon. He's being sent straight to jail for the murder of a senator that banged Lee's wife. We got one of the coolest introductions to the zombie apocalypse as the cop driving you gets distracted in a conversation with Lee and winds up crashing straight into a zombie. If you're really paying attention at this point, or just remember to do it if you've played it more than once, you can even warn the cop right before he hits the zombie.
If I do say so. This other time.
Doesn't matter though, police officer McGee over here will just keep yapping as he runs straight into the damn thing, and we all wind up in a ditch on the side of the road. Lee wakes up to find himself face to face with the police officer, now turned into a full-fledged zombie. Walkers in Walking Dead lingo. We perform our first takedown of a walker and quickly manage to spot what seems to be a figure in the distance. Is that a walker? Is that a human being?
Help!
Help!
Go get someone!
Help me!
There's shooting!
Help!
Whatever the case, you find yourself inside of a house pretty soon after. And inside, you find a walkie zombie! And a walkie-talkie with a voice coming out from the other end. Clementine, a young girl hiding inside the treehouse outside. She lived in this house before her parents left, and that zombie whose head you just caved in was her babysitter. Sheesh. Lee's done some bad things, but he's not a bad guy. He's a bit disoriented from having just murdered 2 people, And now the life of an 8-year-old has just been suddenly entrusted upon him. Clementine's parents are on vacation in Savannah, but
Clementine, baby. If you can hear this, call the police. That's 911.
you overhear an answering machine that doesn't sound so good. So you decide, let's take Clementine in. And the two set off together on the premise that they'll just magically find Clementine's parents and reunite with them. So this is more of a temporary arrangement for now. I'm going to pause here and interject. Isn't there something weird about how fast these two just get along at the beginning of the game? Mind you, the next characters you meet will all be a little suspicious of Lee and the fact that he's just taking care of a random little girl he's never met. But even from Clementine's perspective, this dude just wandered into your house, killed 2 zombies, including your babysitter, and then immediately asks you if you'd like to join him till her parents show up. What do they teach kids in Atlanta? I mean, don't talk to strangers is like the cardinal rule that you have to follow when you grow up in the States. Now you're just going to trust the first stranger that wanders into your house? Okay. The story wouldn't work if these two aren't together, obviously, and considering the circumstances and the fact that Lee is, genuinely a good guy, I think I'd consider letting this slide. But like I said, the first character you meet after taking Clementine, Sean Green, does kind of raise his eyebrows at this predicament.
Just some guy.
Some guy?
Yeah.
She's alone?
Sean takes you and Clementine back to his dad's farm. Hershel Green, a comic book character whose fate is intertwined with Rick Grimes from the comic and the show. He also asks questions about your relationship with Clementine, and the more honest you are with him, the less likely he is to lecture you about lying to others.
Honey, do you know this man?
Yes.
Okay, then.
In any case, no more questions are raised about you and Clementine after this point, so let's just move on and do the same. Maybe Lee reminds Clementine of her own father. I don't know. Let's just move on, please. Hershel takes you in, but only for a day, so you head to the barn and witness one of the game's most random plot holes. So, in his dreams, Lee happens to go through a nightmare of the murder of the senator that he fucking killed before the game even started. And it isn't even made clear why, nor do these nightmares ever come back. And I don't think that this event plays a major role in Lee's character besides entrusting this information to others. So it turns out that these nightmares are what's left of cut content. Minor, mind you, nothing that fundamentally alters the story or takes away from the whole experience, but cut content nonetheless. It seems like Telltale intended to better flesh out Lee's past, as well as some of the history he had with the senator he killed. Just to keep it brief, the senator was actually a close friend of his, so the betrayal and subsequent death is doubly impactful for Lee. We never find out about any of this in the main game, which is fine. I don't particularly care for this storyline, but it's interesting that traces of this still manage to stay in the game fairly early on and then never get brought up again. There's more cut content than Lee's past, but this is the main thing. The other stuff tends to be alternate outcomes to choices and flavorful extra conversation. Mostly fluff. Let's move on.
You can't save anyone, especially not that little girl who relies on you. She's as good as dead.
You wake up the next day and greet the other family taken in by the Greens, Kenny, Katja, and their son Duck. Kenny seems like a pretty nice guy, and he's raising a family, so maybe he can show you the ropes, seeing as you've gotten yourself a kid too out of nowhere. You help a little around the farm, and soon enough, trouble arises. Sean gets his leg trapped in a tractor, and coincidentally, a couple of walkers just show up to attack. Talk about bad timing. You get a choice here to either save Sean or save Duck. Most people choose to save Sean, but it doesn't matter. He dies no matter what you choose. Hershel kicks everyone off the farm no matter who you choose, and Kenny always invites you to go back to your hometown of Macon no matter who you choose. The sequence of events marks the prologue of The Walking Dead and introduces every major gameplay element in one quick fell swoop. So let's go through them. There's 3 major types of gameplay that can occur at any given moment in these games. There's dialogue sequences, like the car ride at the beginning and the Hershel Green interrogation, where the only gameplay is in the dialogues you choose. Sometimes these dialogue choices result in a flavorful response 2 seconds after, or maybe these characters will remember what you said and bring it up in another conversation later. Second, there's action sequences, usually in the form of maybe a quick button mash or a quick time event. These take the form of more traditional gameplay that you would associate with an action game, like Resident Evil or something. Missing these results in game over sequences, where you can kind of see like a bad ending of the game. The 2 walker encounters at the beginning definitely count as these. Lastly, there's the open area sequences. Instead of being funneled through dialogue or action, The Walking Dead can open up an area for a short or a long period of time, allowing you to explore, interact, and conversate with anything that it lets you do. You get this in Hershel's farm, and for a short while in Clementine's house. Any of these 3 sequences can occur at any given moment in any chapter. Okay, I lied. There's actually a 4th sequence. Though it's not a very common sequence and it probably makes up the least amount of actual game time, but I've got to bring it up. The famous major choices that are littered throughout every chapter. These major, critical choices can frequently result in major deviations of a player's story, based on the type of choices you make. Sometimes you won't even be aware that you're in these moments. The most recent example of this happening is when you choose to either save Duck or Sean. And even though this choice doesn't matter, it happens relatively early on in the story for it to feel more like a tutorial or a warning, rather than a major choice you need to make. It's mostly to start getting you used to the idea of having to make a sudden, really important choice in a point of no return. With all this said, I'm not going to talk about the gameplay ever again unless absolutely necessary, so we're going to go full throttle on the narrative and just try to focus on that, okay? Let's just go through the story. That's what matters. So Lee and the gang wind up at a pharmacy in Macon, coincidentally the same drugstore owned by Lee's parents. That's Lee's brother over there. Hey, Lee's brother. You're rescued by a group of survivors holed up here, led by Lily. Joining Lily is her father, Larry, an apathetic old man with a bad case of heartburn and douchebaggery. Alongside Larry and Lily, there's Glenn, who you'll recognize if you've watched the shows or comics. Doug, a nerdy little dorky boy who helped Carly over here from getting bitten by a bunch of zombies earlier. And Larry gets into a bit of a tussle with Kenny because he thinks that Duck has been bitten. He immediately threatens the family with killing the boy. No, don't do it. Don't kill Duck. No. There's going to be a running theme in the game. Larry's being an antagonistic dickhead and Kenny's on the other side, defending his family. Because it's all about family with Kenny. Usually you'll have to choose a side between the two, and for most people, it's going to be choosing Kenny. I mean, there's just no real reason to go with Larry in any option. He's a dickhead to you, he's a dickhead to Kenny, he's a dickhead to everybody. I don't really see any reason to side with anybody other than Kenny, but sometimes it might feel like maybe trying to go through the middle ground is the right choice, but both of them will berate you if you do that, so yeah, it's not really that nuanced. After this incident, you get your second free roam section of the game. There's a list of tasks you need to accomplish, primarily finding some pills for Larry, who's got a heart attack. Woohoo, maybe we should just leave him there. Get some gas with Glenn, he's got a car, so we might as well grab some gas too. And some side objectives like batteries for Carly's radio. I think you can do this in almost any order. There's some like side objectives that you can do, like I said, Carly's radio, talking to Clementine. But you can't get the pills until you go with Glenn. So while there is some agency in how you approach this portion of the game, it's generally pretty closed. But that's okay. It feels more like a game at this point, which is pretty nice. You can walk around, talk to the cast, learn a little bit more about themselves, and apparently the game will record if you're going out of your way to talking to other characters, which is pretty neat, but I don't think this ultimately affects the story. It just opens more room for flavorful dialogue, like I said before. Let's talk to Carly. She's a reporter, so she knows all about your case with the senator. Maybe we shouldn't have talked to Carly. She admits that she doesn't really care about your past, given the circumstances, even exclaiming that those killing skills might be useful. She promises to keep your secret a secret, and you can choose to trust her at this point. I don't know why you wouldn't, but Carly's a bit slow, so Clementine overhears everything about this conversation.
Lee?
Yeah?
You're not bad, right?
You got a choice here to either tell her about your past or lie to her, and I just don't see why you would lie to Clementine. Even if it is to protect her innocence and to try to hide, it feels wrong. It feels wrong to lie to this little girl.
That lady said you killed someone. Was that because he was one of the things trying to eat you?
No, he wasn't.
Oh. Was he bad?
He was.
You get a pretty heartwarming scene with Clementine where you bond over the lack of parents. Very wholesome. Lee has to put in some extra effort to console Clementine and hide the fact that they may not be alive after this. This is all happening at the same time as Lee is dealing with the fact that his own parents are dead. Are we just going to forget and gloss over the fact that this is fucking Lee's parents' pharmacy? His dead brother is outside moaning and groaning and acting all zombie-like, and his parents apparently just died. They got rid of the corpses before Lee even got here. And he can't tell anybody. He can't tell anyone. Well, maybe he can tell Carly and Clementine, but he's not going to. He's not going to give him that burden. So while all of this is happening, he still has to console Clementine about her parents being gone. They might still be alive, but as far as you know, they're goners. Lee may not have ever had a daughter, but he did have a wife. One of those things tends to lead to another. She cheated on him, and his family kind of ditched him. So there's something to be said about both these characters, Lee and Clementine, being entirely alone in the world. Without each other, the grief might just be that much more. I don't think either of these two characters could survive as long as they did without each other. Lee and Clementine give each other reasons to live. Lee for, just that, hope, a beacon of light, whatever you want to call it. And Clementine for, well, a parent. There is no chance an 8-year-old can survive in a zombie apocalypse alone. So Lee is more than just a beacon of hope for Clementine. He is her survival. These are just some of the earliest parallels you can see with Lee and Clementine. You might have thought that this story was just about Clementine losing her parents and looking to Lee for protection. I thought this too before I replayed these games. Turns out my memory was a bit foggy because this whole portion of the game dedicates serious amounts of time for Lee to reminisce, mourn, and move on from the death of his own family. Something that Clementine experiences throughout the first game, whereas Lee goes through by the end of episode 1. By this point in the story, I was already hooked and engaged with this relationship, and dead set on putting Clementine's life over my own, over many of these characters. Something that games like BioShock, The Last of Us, none of these games could accomplish. None. Not a single one. After the scene with Clementine, it's time to start the action. Glenn radios in to let you know that he's found a motel with gas, so you head out with Carly to see what's up. Turns out that Glenn's found himself a little girlfriend trapped inside the motel. Good for you, Glenn. After a short puzzle sequence where you clear out a bunch of zombies, you climb your way onto the motel to find the girl. To everybody's horror, she's been bitten, and she doesn't want to go out like her boyfriend did. That is to say, turning into a zombie. After a bit of a wrestle, she manages to get control of the gun and shoot herself with it. What you may not remember is that you actually get the choice to give her the gun at this point, allowing you to avoid the whole wrestle. Either way, she shoots herself, attracts more walkers, and forces everyone to head back home. What a bummer. For some people, turning is a fate worse than death. Understandable, since the two things are one and the same. Just, much slower. After heading back, you use the axe you got from the motel to clear a path to your brother. He's got the keys for the pharmacy, so you say your goodbyes, but it's still a pretty tough scene to witness, as Lee just has to, say goodbye to his past at this point. This is really his opportunity to just wave away his past. There's no follow-up with the senator or Lee's wife after this point. This is all that Lee has that connects him to a life before the apocalypse. That and the constant reminders from everybody that he's a killer, but that really doesn't play that much of a role. This is tangible. This is someone who used to know him. It's kind of brutal if you think about it. It might seem like a pretty nonsense scene at the moment, okay, who cares? I didn't know this guy. Lee knew him, but I didn't know him. But it's still, still kind of sad to think about. Carly's battery can be fixed pretty easy, but she reveals what a dumbass she is in this scene. That's a recurring trend, Carly being a dumbass. First, she can't figure out the radio needs batteries, then she puts the batteries in on the wrong fucking side. Then she forgets to pull out the antenna. Isn't this girl a reporter? Surely she knows her way around a computer or a camera. Radios are old tech, I suppose, but still. You head into the pharmacy with Lily, immediately triggering the security alarm, attracting every zombie in Macon. You get an action sequence, protecting the drugstore with the rest of the gang, and are treated to the final, major, critical choice of the series. One that does have significant consequences for the story, especially for the immediate chapter. Whether to save Doug or Carly from walkers. Whoever you choose will be saved, whereas the other person gets mauled by zombies. Most people tend to choose to save Doug? Wait. Hold on. Is the Mandela effect kicking my ass at the moment? I could have sworn Carly was the more popular choice. What with her being much more present in the story, owner of a gun, and, do I have to say it? Do I have to say it out loud? Doug's got his own group of fans, it seems, though. And I guess he's a cool guy. Maybe he's hashtag relatable to this 52%. Big-ass fat neckbeard. Nah, I'm playing. Either way, though, the other person you don't choose will die in a pretty brutal way, getting mauled and eaten alive by zombies. This conclusion to episode 1 is a pretty memorable one. I think most people who've ever heard of this game, seen a playthrough, probably remember this moment as being the genesis of The Walking Dead and the Telltale franchise. Wow, I really did just pick between the lives of two characters. Two characters that, honestly, feel sort of interesting. I want to know more about Carly and Doug, and now I never will if you picked Doug. I'll never learn about Carly. If you picked Carly, I'll never know about Doug. And apparently Carly had a bit of a crush on Doug, which is kind of sad, It's like choosing between Romeo and Juliet. After this, you get attacked by Larry the bastard. Kenny won't leave without you, though, and you're immediately hauled back to the motel from earlier. After arriving at the motel, Glenn tells you that he's going to head out and find his friends in Atlanta. This is technically where he goes before the events of the comics, so it's a sort of way to say goodbye to this character and move on. You'll never see Glenn again for the rest of the series. You get a couple of thank yous and conversations with survivors, including Larry. Apparently, he's well versed in your personal history, seeing you as a complete and total threat based on your past with the state senator. I guess this is the other side of that coin with Carly's conversation. Whereas she's willing to look past your case and even admit to it being kind of justifiable in a later conversation, Larry sees you as a threat to the group. You're the only proven killer without the context of the apocalypse, making you just generally untrustworthy. It doesn't really matter as the episode ends a few seconds later. Episode 1 done. In typical Telltale fashion, Episode 1 ends on a cliffhanger, pushing the player to want to keep seeing what happens next. We've ended on an exciting note, with the recent trauma of Carly or Doug's death fresh in our minds. I'm sure many players couldn't wait to see how that choice would impact the next episodes, and whether or not more characters would die at the hands of their decisions. Unfortunately, it's at this point of the video where I'm going to have to address the most contentious topic of the Telltale series of games, the choices. Every single Telltale game starts out with the quick text prompt, "This game adapts to the choices you make, tailored by how you play." This might trick you into thinking that your choices will cause major shifts in the game's timeline, with huge impacts on the narrative and plot. It turns out that this is a bit misleading. Yes, there are choices in this game that lead to changes in the game, but the degree to which is far more limited than you would think. Helping Carly fix her radio is a minor choice in the game, one that gives you more context about her character, but not something that will save you or Carly's life at any point in the game or something like that. These minor choices work fairly consistently across the games. They're almost always a flavorful choice. They help contextualize the game you're playing, making you feel like your choices matter, but ultimately resulting in purely minor changes in dialogue, or just new info about the characters themselves, background info and whatnot. These are still great. Not every choice needs to be revolutionary. Some of them need to be small so that the big ones have a chance to shine. Plus, these minor choices are excellent for adding player agency into the game. Since you directly control what to say to characters, it better connects you to Lee or to whoever you're talking to, even if the dialogue's effect on the story is negligible. There's definitely a psychological effect at play here, guided by the constant drip feeding of decisions, helping you get that much closer to the story, making you feel like it can't proceed without you. Which it can't, obviously. This is a video game, and I think that Telltale's game design allows for a successful degree of storytelling via the outlet of gaming and interactivity. What's problematic is that major choices, as opposed to minor ones, also fail to make any fundamental changes to the overall plot. After the end of every episode, Telltale lets you see how your choices compare to other players of the game. These are what, I would assume, Telltale considers to be the major choices present in every chapter. It's clear that some of these choices are just more important than others. Is lying to Hershel equal to the choice of saving Doug or Carly? At least with Doug or Carly, you actually come out of it with an entirely different character, whereas choosing to save Duck or Sean ends up saving Duck, regardless of your choice. What does that say about the choice between Duck and Sean? Is this still even a major choice, knowing that it doesn't affect the game, the plot? Is this supposed to be some sort of morality check, where you would think about choosing a child's life over a teenager's?
Sorry! Your son is alive. You don't get to be sorry. And you didn't even try to help.
I'm sorry.
Sorry! Your son is alive. You don't get to be sorry. You tried to help him, but this piece of shit let him die.
I don't think any of these choices are meant to offer objective changes to the game. Telltale deserves to get some flack for the false assumption that your choices matter, in the sense that they can objectively change the story, right? Subjectively, though, every single decision you make matters. Every single thing you do could alter the way you think. It can say something about you personally. It doesn't have to affect the story, does it? Did giving Irene the gun, or keeping the gun from her, save her from an untimely death? No. But maybe the act of being given a hard choice, one that ultimately carries no consequences, but the choice itself, is that where the value lies? I think so. I know for a split second, having to think about whether to save Duck, the child of a man I've never met before, and Sean, the son of the farmer, hosting Clementine and myself. And, we're saving the guy that just rescued us from Clementine's house earlier in the episode. How is the game able to generate some value out of this moment? Well, okay, so if I chose to save Sean, it doesn't change the plot, but now I've got an entirely different perspective on the rest of the game, and Kenny will complain that I didn't help Duck. Maybe now I'm more inclined to help him later in the game, since I owe him for going for Sean in that initial choice. You see where I'm going with this? I could sit here and think about these choices for hours, but I only get a few seconds to do so. And I could have ass blast Telltale all day for making players think that this was a crazy narrative adventure with wild twists and turns, but it isn't. For example, games like Until Dawn or Life is Strange, don't worry, there won't be any spoilers, but they evolved on what Telltale was doing by not only giving you thought-provoking choices with very little room for second guessing, they also made the consequences of those choices cataclysmic to the overall plot. Entire characters will die depending on how you play the game, closing off entire portions of gameplay as a consequence. So not only do the choices have the weight like they do in The Walking Dead, they feel even more satisfying in hindsight when you know what could have happened. The Walking Dead doesn't have this, at least not in Season 1. Seasons 2 and 3 managed to fit in multiple endings, with choices that will completely alter the fates of multiple core characters of the games. And yet, these two games managed to garner the most controversy in the series. Instead, it's the fixed design of Season 1 and 4 stories that ended up being the most memorable and appreciated in the franchise. Not because we all got to see the one true ending, right? But because Telltale was able to organize their whole story around their one ending. Players couldn't deviate far enough for Telltale to have to constantly adjust their message or story. Instead, the major choices ended up getting cancelled out or flat out forgotten over the course of the games, and this trend exists outside of The Walking Dead, across the entire Telltale library. You'll still see plenty of discourse online over this topic. Why even bother having choices if they don't affect the story? Well, it's like I said earlier, the act of making a choice, even a false one, engages the player to think and connect with the game. I think it happens subconsciously, but I'm not a psychologist and I'm just talking out of my ass at this point. So what I really do think, though, is that there's value in these choices, minor or major, flavorful or otherwise. As we'll get to in episode 2, some decisions can elicit some pretty serious visceral reactions from players. The fact that I did the thing, even if the thing was going to happen across all possible playthroughs, is much more powerful because I did the thing, rather than maybe seeing Lee do the thing, or seeing the thing happen in a cutscene. Does that make any sense? I'm the one causing the changes, even if the changes are the same. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't really care that choices don't matter. I'll admit that these games could be better if that wasn't the case. The good news is that two characters in this game, Kenny and Clementine, will have their own decisions that you can influence depending on your relationship with them. So in some ways, your choices alongside Kenny and Clementine do matter. These relationships are built over time depending on how you treat them, and the relationship building is key to the overall story. So even if the plot doesn't change, you could finish the game with a Lee that's sympathetic to Kenny, and one that showed Clementine the harsh reality of the real world. Or you could end up with a Lee that is in a total bromance with Kenny, and with a Clementine that would do anything for Lee, even if it means the worst. Episode 1 is indicative of the rest of the game. The gameplay will continue to be a mix of these three sequences I described earlier, and the story will continue to be about the relationship between Lee and Clementine. Moral choices and their consequences will continue to scatter across the various moments of each episode, but rarely will they affect the plot in a way that alters the story. And I think that's okay. I'll still bring up the choices when they come up. I'll give you my thoughts and opinion on each one, but you're going to hear me say that doesn't matter. This doesn't matter quite a bit, so get ready to tune that out every so often. Okay, let's move on. Episode 2, Start for Help, is my favorite in the entire season. 3 months have passed since we last saw the group, and we're already getting introduced to some new characters when Lee and Mark over here walk up to 3 bozos in the woods. Ben and Travis are students on a field trip when the apocalypse started, and David over here is their teacher. He's caught in a bear trap. Yeah, straight out of the gate, we're offered a major choice to free or abandon David to the walkers. This was one other case of a choice that really doesn't matter. No matter which choice you pick, either David or Travis will end up getting killed. Besides some flavorful dialogue, this is not a choice with any major consequences, as we'll see later. You lead Ben and the potentially amputated David or the hurt Travis back to camp and receive some harassment from Larry and Lily for bringing more mouths to feed. Since the end of the last episode, the group has had difficulty providing food to everyone in camp, resulting in a bit of a famine amongst the survivors. Lee is handed 4 pieces of food as punishment to give out to the larger group. A punishment because there's 10 mouths to feed and only 4 pieces of food, so whoever you end up feeding could piss people off. So who will it be? Well, what are you fucking kidding?
How you doing, Clementine?
If I could give Clementine all 4 pieces of food, I would. Part of me knows that she wouldn't want that to happen, so I'll have to share. Hey, Clementine. Where's your hat, Clementine? If you want to give Kenny some food, you'll need to feed his family first. That means you'll have to give out 2 other pieces of food before even thinking about Kenny. I chose to feed the youth and the elderly, so Clementine, Duck, the newly added Ben, and Larry were the 4 that I chose. This doesn't feel like a pretty major choice when you first make it, but I like the option of thinking about who to give food to. It feels a little bit more moral, even if it isn't necessarily impactful. I'll be willing to forgive choices like these when they feel like you're really thinking about them. After handing out the last piece of food, you're given the unfortunate news that David or Travis have passed away. No matter who you chose to pick, the other will just eventually die from their injuries. What's even worse is that they reanimate a few seconds later, attacking Katja. After a quick tussle, the group hounds Ben for not telling you that Travis or David were bitten. We then learn one of the most important rules in The Walking Dead fiction. Dying reanimates you, no matter how you die, a bite or otherwise. The only way to avoid reanimation is through damage to the brain. The world of The Walking Dead is richer than your average zombie flick. The fact that it extends to the games is great, and you get a cool twist to the world if you're not at all familiar with the source material like I was when I first played these games. Killing Zombie David or Zombie Travis puts the group nowhere closer to the whole starvation problem, but these 2 random gentlemen from the woods seem to offer an alternative. These are Andrew and Danny St. John, owners of a dairy farm nearby looking for gasoline. Fortunately, Lee's group is stationed in a gas station, so there's room here for a trade. Andrew and Danny offer to show Lee and the group the farm if they wish. Lee can make a choice to disagree here, but things are desperate. You'll have to go no matter what you choose. And for once, this feels like a choice where it's appropriate for it not to mean a damn thing. You go with Andrew and Danny alongside Mark, Ben, and whoever you saved in Chapter 1, Doug or Carly. Andrew and Danny's mother is at the farm, and she offers to throw everyone a big hootenanny, especially since Katja, the resident vet, is wanting to check their last cow, since she's feeling unwell, the poor thing. They send Carly or Doug and Ben to pick up the remaining survivors while Lee and Mark work on fixing the electric fence surrounding the barn. It's on this lap, around the fence, that the electricity turns on and Mark is suddenly struck by an arrow. A short action sequence later where you have to push a truck across a farm in order to make cover for yourself, Lee and Mark make an escape, and the St. Johns explain that they've been at the mercy of these bandits for a while now, forced to give tribute to the bandits in exchange for protection, or at least a lack of attacks, because there really isn't much else that's threatening the group besides the bandits themselves. This recent attack is now an officially breaking of the truce they had. Meanwhile, Mark is just chilling in the corner over here. I guess we just forgot that he has a whole-ass arrow sticking out of his shoulder. Someone help this man! Brenda takes him into the house to tend to his wounds, thank God, and the rest of the gang decides on how to handle the bandit problem. Opportunity arises. Maybe if Lee gets rid of these bandits, they can join the farm and make a home out of this place. So Lee, accompanied by Danny, make their way into the forest where they think the bandits are hiding. You get some useful information. Apparently the bandits have been stealing from the farm for a while now, including food and a videotape which doesn't seem to belong to the farmhands, but Lee takes it anyway. Lee also finds Clementine's hat. There's your hat, Clementine. But how did that get here? Why is there a child's sleeping bag here? It means they're holding prisoners, because one of those prisoners is now pointing a crossbow at the 2 of you. Jolene, who's come back to the camp for revenge, threatens to shoot you if you don't put your gun down. It's here you're given another choice, whether to shoot Jolene or let her go. Letting her go means nothing. Danny will just shoot her right after you don't. If you choose to shoot her, then you'll do exactly that. Jolene will just die. Another case here of choices not really meaning more than just flavor. Returning to the farm, and already things are getting sussy. Danny neglects to tell his mother about the woman he killed, if that was the choice that was made. So I guess there's a little flavorful dialogue here. And Kenny, he's just not buying the whole let's give these guys free food charade. So you head into the barn where the kids are at and see Duck and Clementine near the sick cow. She's not so much sick as she is pregnant. The miracle of life. Here's your hat back, Clementine.
My hat! You found it!
Aww.
I knew you'd find it. You said you would.
Ouch! This is a good moment as any to say that Melissa Hutchinson's performance as Clementine is perfect. I wouldn't change anything. From games 1 through 4, it is literally perfect.
Daddy said it's called a salt lick.
Yeah, but don't lick it. It's gross.
Did you lick it?
I don't know.
Kenny asked you to help him figure out what's at the end of the barn. Apparently there's some blood leaking from the bottom. And this is a dairy farm after all, so Kenny, maybe this is where they have the slaughterhouse, don't you think? I don't know, it's just me. I'm just suspecting that since it's a dairy farm, maybe they got themselves a butcher's place here, like a whole slaughterhouse where they kill cute little animals and eat them. But whatever, you can pursue this lead and try to distract Andrew so that you can open the gate to the slaughterhouse, and you have to go through this whole puzzle sequence if you really want to commit to it. You can also decide to just not do it and head straight to dinner. Or at least you still have to go through the effort of solving the puzzle, but whatever. This is a choice that actually can matter. If you choose to pursue it and open the door, you'll see that it is a slaughterhouse. Andrew catches you in the act, but he tells you just that, that this is in fact the St. John Dairy Farm, not the St. John Ranch. We eat animals here. We don't fucking just treat them and pet them around and keep them as pets. No, we kill them. And this is where we do that son bitch. Lee's not buying it though, and at this point, neither should you. But everybody's hungry, and there's a feast waiting for you back at home, so who are you to deny the people? The next sequence is arguably one of the best moments in the Walking Dead franchise, and certainly the reason why I consider this to be the top tier moments of this series. Walking into the St. John house, having seen what you might have just seen, with Mark still missing. And have you seen Danny St. John's face? Just look at the guy. He's got creepy written all over him.
Times like these, a 243 will keep you warmer at night than any lady I ever known.
It feels like something is up, but you just can't put your finger on it. Lee asks to use the bathroom right before dinner, but secretly heads upstairs to investigate one last time. After looking at a suspicious closet, Lee notices unusual wires leading to the master bedroom. The wires are disconnected at the closet, alongside some bloody bandages and medical supplies. Gross. More importantly, there's a hole in the wall where the wire's coming from. Once you connect the wires, a light will come out. Following this trail reveals what really happened to Mark after he was injured by the bandits. Sprawled on the floor, legs completely gone, blood splattered everywhere. Mark only has a few words left to give, but it doesn't even really matter what he has to say. The player understands exactly what has just transpired and is already in turbo rush mode to rescue Clementine from eating human meat. Blood pumping, knees weak, arms are heavy, there's vomit on my sweater already, Mark, spaghetti. And then you scream,
"Don't eat that!"
The facade is over. The St. John's don't trade in dairy after all. They deal in human meat. There's a brief uproar as you try to explain what happened, but a combination of the St. John's straight up confessing and Mark finding his way downstairs immediately confirms that what Lee says is true.
Please. Someone.
The plan from the start was to make everyone big and plump to be butchered later. This wasn't a cannibal initiation ceremony. They intend to eat everybody here, except for Katja. They need her for the vet skills. As things get more and more hostile, Andrew St. John grabs Clementine by the hair. Lee subsequently gets hit by the other St. John brother, and the scene ends on a climactic note. Oof. So that part was a doozy, right? The stakes are high, the curtain's been raised on the St. John's little performance, but can we just sit here and appreciate how well Telltale raised the tension during the scene? Like, is it just me? Am I the only one who absolutely adores this scene? Because I do. I think this is one of the most tenseful moments of the whole series. If you don't know anything about The Walking Dead, anything about this series, the comics, the show, then you probably had no idea that they were going to throw cannibals out of nowhere. Especially on Chapter 2, it feels like we still needed some more room to get used to the idea of humans being part of the evil. But nope, here they are in all their glory, and they are fucked up. I remember feeling off about the St. John's long before we started getting super obvious hints with this girl saying that they're monsters and the fucking insane asylum hiding in the back of the barn. Like, clearly something wasn't right. Right? But cannibalism, god damn, that is heavy metal. Duck doesn't hesitate to go crazy on Mark's legs, but Clementine can be saved if you yell out the right word. Meaning, she can actually end up eating human meat if you're not careful, which feels like a flavorful choice that carries real, tangible, moral consequences. This is the type of stuff that really hits different. Just that sequence alone, when you've put the pieces together and all you can think is, Clementine, oh shit, I remember just getting like a visceral reaction to that. Like I genuinely had to rush downstairs and save this girl from eating that human meat. Genuine crisis mode. And yet, you can in fact fuck this up. You can end up having Clementine eat human meat, which to me, again, is one of those choices where you would think, okay, this doesn't have many consequences. After you make this choice, it never gets brought up again. It's not like Clementine eating human meat taints her forever. It's not like she's going to hate you because she eats human meat. It really isn't a big deal. But is it though? What about what I feel inside? I wasn't able to protect Clementine from eating human meat. That makes me feel like shit. That is a choice that, if I hadn't done it right, I probably would have restarted the file and made sure that my version of Clementine has never set foot near human meat. But, that's just me. That was a choice that was flavorful, but didn't really feel that way. Anyway, forward. Lee wakes up in a meat container along with Kenny, Clementine, Lily, and Larry. Thank God. This could have been a prime opportunity for Telltale to get lazy and have Clementine be held hostage or something, alongside the rest of the gang, forcing Lee to stand down or sit back and wait until Clementine gets rescued. Instead, Clementine's here alongside the rest of us, and it's Kenny's family that's in danger. Not that that's a good thing, it's just, we saved ourselves a cliche story beat. Carly and Ben are still presumably back at base, so we can't really depend on them. The tension between Kenny and Lily is palpable at this point. I've left out that there's actually been a bit of a power struggle between Kenny and Lily, and who should be calling the shots. At this point in the story, the tension is at its peak, as in the middle of all this stress, Larry finds himself face first onto the ground. Major heart attack alert. One of the most important choices in the whole game takes place here, even though it's still flavorful. Whether you choose to kill a presumably dead Larry before he reanimates, because of course, Kenny doesn't want to be the one on the other side of a 6-foot-tall, 300-pound zombie, or you can choose to side with Lily and refuse to kill Larry. Doesn't matter. Kenny will still grab a fucking salt lick from the ground, smash his head in, but if you did side with Lily, at least you're on better terms with her and on not so good terms with Kenny for not supporting him. Again, this is another situation of those promises I was talking about earlier. This decision, this moment is critical to the overall plot of the whole game, but you're not given a choice that actually affects the plot in a critical way. As you'll soon find out in the rest of the story, the act of killing Larry carries enormous consequences, not just for you, but for the group, and for Lily, of course, but for everyone. Everyone. This whole ordeal kicks off a massive butterfly effect that ends the group eventually. Spoiler alert. But you really don't have much choice in how that plays out, whether or not you choose to kill Larry. Instead, it's just another situation of, do you want to win rapport points with Kenny, or do you want to be the good guy? That's all it really surmounts to. In which case, doesn't feel like a big deal because there's so many different ways to get bonus points with Kenny. This isn't really an opportunity to fuck that up. I think the choice is pretty straightforward. What I mean by that is that killing Larry seems like the immoral choice initially. Because there's really no way to confirm if Larry is dead before the salt lick squashes half his face. Couldn't Kenny have waited a little bit till Larry started moaning or making dead noises? I mean, there's a very visible difference between a human and a walker. I feel like if we had just given it a second, maybe seen if the guy was starting to move, maybe he's not breathing. I'm pretty sure he wasn't breathing. I mean, he's probably clinically dead at this point. But, then again, to play devil's advocate, we're kind of in a rush here, trying to get out of this room, all right? Some of these motherfuckers are about to get eaten. We can't just sit here and act like we are not in a meat locker with a bunch of cannibals outside, okay? And he's having a heart attack. There's really no chance we're just going to find a nurse or a hospital at this point. So it might have been a brutal choice to make, but I don't think it was an illogical choice to make. Either way, Larry's story ends here. No matter what you do, you can't save him from having a heart attack, you can't save him from getting killed by Kenny, and whatever you do, you can't save him from being a dick to you. So, maybe good riddance. With Clementine's help, you're able to escape the fridge and find a weapon to confront the brothers with. You leave with Kenny and are immediately confronted by Danny. Depending on whether you chose to help kill Larry or not, Kenny or Lily will come out of the shadows to save you from Danny. So I guess this is a choice that kind of affects the plot, but ultimately this is just a flavorful decision. It doesn't matter who comes to help you. Both Kenny and Lily will help you from Danny. You now get the choice to kill Danny with a pitchfork or spare him. Now we're talking. Now this is a choice that does matter, because whether or not you choose to kill Danny will affect his fate for the rest of the game. Does he have any impact on the rest of the story whether or not you spare him? None at all. In fact, the only seemingly bad choice of choosing to kill him is that you'll have Clementine watch the whole thing. So maybe that's not a nice sight to see your whole father figure just brutally murder a man. It seems a little too far. I appreciate that for once it feels like this is a choice that does matter, because we don't actually know what happens to Danny if he's alive. On the other hand, if we choose to kill him, then that's a very definitive end to this character, right? We know for sure that this dude is not coming back alive. You quickly regroup with the rest of the survivors, Ben and Carly, or Doug, obviously, depending on who you saved. The plan to rescue Katja is afoot, as she's currently being held hostage by Brenda. This sequence is a little different from the rest of the game, and is actually very visually striking. This is not something that you're going to see very often in this series, or in gaming in general. You're meant to slowly get closer to Brenda, while asking her questions so that Mark's reanimated walker corpse can grab her from behind and rescue Katja. Something about the storm in the background, the dimly lit house, Mark's zombie body in the back, and the whole hostage situation thing that made this scene very memorable for me. It's just so visually impressive, right? The tense nature of it, the fact that the camera is right behind Lee and you can see Brenda and she's pointing a gun straight at you. I don't know, it was just very memorable, very dramatic, and very, very dope to look at. It was like a portrait in and of itself. Eventually, Mark's zombie form gets his sweet revenge, feasting on Brenda and freeing Katja from her clutches. There's only one St. John left, Andrew, who has so far felt the most hesitant of the three hermanos. Doesn't matter, still a cannibal. He's holding Doug hostage, and in an embarrassing display by Kenny, brother gets shot in the stomach right as he's trying to free Doug. Like, what kind of sick joke is this, dude? Come on, get the fuck up, all right? He shot you in the gut. I saw that. Get up. Either Carly or Doug managed to distract Andrew, freeing Doug and opening a final duel between Andrew and yourself. Depending on whether you helped kill Larry, Lily will or will not help you in this fight. She'll just look at you as if you're like, about to die, and maybe that was for the best. Like, Shotty, help me out. What the fuck? Either way, you'll win this fight, so it doesn't really matter if you helped kill Larry again. You get another choice to go beast mode on Andrew St. John, or just spare him. This choice lets you spare Andrew just like his brother, which means that, once again, there's a death status that's completely unclear if you decide to let them live. They never show up in the series ever again, okay? They're never confirmed dead if you spare them. Plot-wise, this choice does not matter. But narrative-wise, there's a lesson to be learned here. If you choose to kill Danny or Andrew, to kill both of them, to kill either or, everyone kind of bears witness to what you do. So there are some influence, some impact on, I would say, the whole narrative holistically than just like the one-to-one plot that the writers are writing, right? And just to reiterate, these two characters may or may not be alive following the end of this chapter if you choose to let them live.
Lee!
After this whole ordeal ends, the crew walks back to the motel, hungry and sad for the events that just transpired. They eventually wander upon a car filled with loot. Clementine and Lily will voice their disapproval at looting someone's car. Clearly this doesn't belong to us. But Kenny, Doug, Carly, and Ben all hop on the looting train. You can either choose to agree or disagree with Clementine here, which is another example of choices that stack. So choices like these, I will categorize as the ones that do matter, because eventually they will stack up to a conclusion that feels earned, whereas if you're choosing to neglect Clementine over and over, like, are you even playing the game right? I'm not going to say that, right? Obviously, the way you're playing the game is the way you're playing the game, but you kind of understand here that the game is trying to push you to certain choices. You can still choose to not make them, and the ending will slightly change based on the choices you make. But generally speaking, this is just a matter of stacking up the choices rather than it being an individual choice that actually changes the plot, right? It's a collection of all these choices with Clementine and Kenny that end up meaning something different by the end of their journeys, rather than, again, the individual choices you see, right? Choosing to agree or disagree with Clementine here may neglect her from a fucking sweater, okay? That's the tangible choice, I guess, the tangible difference that you've made. But, to the plot, to what's happening in the story, to character deaths, it doesn't affect anything. This episode will conclude with the recording that Lee picked up from the camp. Carly, now understanding how batteries work, will hand him a couple batteries so he can watch the recording. It shows Jolene from earlier spying on the camp and how she was planning to take Clementine after the death of her own daughter at the hands of the bandits, of which she was a part of. At least now we know how Clementine's hat ended up in the bandit camp. The recording concludes with another one of Walking Dead's major elements, the notion that the real danger of this world is the humans that survived it, not the zombies, which helps us sort of wrap up what we just learned from the bandits, the depths that Lee might sink into in order to protect his kin and exact revenge, and of course the St. Johns themselves. Jolene might be talking about the bandits here, but we know for sure that it was the St. Johns that acted as the main antagonists for this chapter. It was them who were able to find themselves an arrangement to survive in this new world at the cost of their own humanity.
Don't worry, little girl. Bandits got their eye on that dairy. As long as they keep getting food from them, you'll be safe. I promise.
So that was episode 2. I'll start by reiterating that again, this is my favorite chapter in the entire first game. The tense and desperate nature of uncovering the mystery behind the St. Johns, everything about connecting them with the bandits to the super emotional scene where you're about to see Clementine eat human meat, everything about that was so enjoyable and so interesting. You know something's up, but you can't quite put your finger on it till you see Mark sprawled on the floor. I mean, just everything about this was fire, man. Just straight up fuego. The group loses 2 members of the team too, so there's been a bit of drama here. Mark, who was actually a new character for this episode, and Larry, who we'd been following since episode 1. We gained a Ben, which is aight, but he really hasn't done much this episode besides the, revelation at the beginning of it. The death of Larry, that's really what's at the center here. That's what's really trying to marinate and create some consequences maybe for episode 3. We really don't know how Lily is going to react to this. I doubt that she's going to take it in stride given that, this is the man who raised her. There's a lot I want to talk about this character. Okay, there's a lot I want to examine about Lily and Larry in particular and why I think there's a little bit more here than just 2 assholes who care too much about each other. But we'll save it for the next chapter because something important about her character will happen in the next chapter, so I'll bring it up then, just to wrap things up in a nice little knot, right? All in all, I think episode 2 is the best, okay? It really is the best. I would even go as far to say it is the best in the whole series. It executes on its mystery. The bandits seemingly are still here, so what's the implication with them? What are we going to handle with the bandits now that they're still around and now that they don't have a whole ass farm to supply their food with? Well, I guess we'll see. Episode 3 starts out in the streets of Macon. Lee and Kenny are out scouting for loot as Kenny reminds the audience on the current status of the group. The siege on the St. John's dairy meant that the local bandits no longer have a dependable source of food, so they've taken to regularly attacking home camp. Even though it's been a while, Kenny is getting ready to jump ship and leave with his family in an RV that he's fixed up. This whole conversation occurs right in front of the Everett Pharmacy from episode 1. There really isn't much time to reminisce before a screaming woman comes out of the shadows and is immediately hounded by a group of walkers. You get the choice here to shoot her or let her get eaten as a distraction. This choice gives you more time to pick up loot inside the pharmacy, but trust me when I say that it doesn't matter how much loot you pick up. So even though this might feel like a tangible gameplay choice for once, the fact that you have more time to loot and the fact that you end up looting more stuff does not impact the story at fucking all. It is all flavorful. You make your escape from the pharmacy, and depending on how well you've treated Kenny so far, he'll either immediately come to your help or he'll hesitate. You can probably guess how he feels about you based on these 2 possible outcomes. So I guess this is a moment where you kind of have to judge Kenny's relationship. Like, oh damn, he hesitated. Maybe I'm not so close with him. It's a sign that those choices with Kenny are mattering, or at least for now, are going to matter at some point, because the game is judging your relationship with him. Either way, you eventually return back to camp and report to Lily, who's still calling the shots. Larry's death has taken a toll on Lily. She's more confrontational, more suspicious, more paranoid than ever, and her spats with Kenny have only gotten more intense. Everybody's doubting her leadership, even more now that Kenny is fixing to leave. What's worse is that Lily seems to think someone's been stealing medical supplies from her own personal collection, implying that there's a traitor among us. So for the rest of this section, you're meant to investigate who could be stealing medical supplies, and if there's even any proof that it's happening. Lily really could just be losing her mind. As soon as you start investigating, Duck will come up to you with a proposition. He'll be your Watson to your Sherlock, if you'll let him. Investigate the stolen supplies together. See if he can help you find some clues. Maybe he knows something you don't. You can choose to get his help or choose not to. I don't see a point to not accepting Duck's help. We haven't really had a lot of Duck-Lee interaction this game, so why not do it now? You can interrogate pretty much everyone, and some of them can result in some funny interaction.
You didn't accidentally break a flashlight, did you?
No. Did Duck say I did?
No. Did Duck break the flashlight?
I don't think so. He's just always blaming me for stuff.
Like what?
Putting a bug on his pillow?
Did you do that?
Yes.
If someone said 3 years from now, you'd be long gone.
If Carly's still alive at this point, you get the choice to tell everyone about your criminal past. This is neat because it's the one thing that gives the choice between Carly and Doug some added impact. The gameplay can actually change here, depending on the choice you made. Not to mention your relationships with other characters, now that you can tell them about what you've done. Most of them react the same way, a slight mix of sympathy and discomfort. Nobody treats you any lesser, and most appreciate the honesty. Not telling them won't change the plot much, so you could still argue here that saving Carly fundamentally doesn't matter. But I like being able to tell Kenny and Clementine and all these characters, this is not me anymore, guys. I am a changed man. I mean, you've seen me. You've seen me as a changed man. Alright, I'm good now. Over the course of this section, Lee comes to find out that there indeed is a traitor. Someone's been taking medical supplies and trading with the bandits, which explains why they haven't attacked in a while. As soon as you bring this to Lily, the bandits attack. Thanks for the lookout work, Ben. Fucking useless son of a... You enter into a pretty unique action sequence where you're meant to generally aim at walkers, and some of the bandits too, but it might as well be a cookie clicker flash game for all it's worth. You know, it's not really that long, and it's kind of straightforward. You just shoot at the general direction of these characters, and then click. Everyone's forced to hop into the RV, but not before finding out that during the raid, Duck gets bit. God damn it. If Chapter 2 was tense for the underlying mystery behind the St. John's, Chapter 3 is tragic due to the dissolution of the group following Chapter 2's events. Nearly everything can be traced back to the attack. Obviously, the fault lies with the bandits and with the St. John's themselves, but Lily and Kenny's antagonism with each other is rooted at leadership struggles long before we met the St. John's, long before Larry died. His death just made matters worse and gave fuel for what Lily is about to do next. Now that she has proof, Lily begins accusing the two people most likely to have betrayed the group, Carly or Doug, and Ben. Since they're mostly independent of anyone, they could be looking out for themselves, and only themselves. Kenny makes a stop in the middle of the highway after running over a walker, and it's here, in the middle of nowhere, where things truly escalate. Lily, more sure than ever that it's Ben, begins interrogating him. Nothing you do at this point, including trying to shift some of the blame to yourself, can prevent Lily from shooting Doug or Carly right after. God fucking damn it, Lily. It doesn't matter anymore who the traitor was. What Lily does is unforgivable. Lee immediately disarms her and is given the choice abandoning her at the highway or bringing her along, despite what she just did. In another episode of Does Telltale's Choice Matter?, you'll eventually find out that this choice doesn't matter. Choosing to abandon or bring Lily along, it really is irrelevant, as one way or another she will leave the group following this scene. If you abandon her now, then you'll do just that, abandon her now. This is the last time you'll ever see Lily in this game, as she's seen being chased by a bunch of walkers in the middle of nowhere. If you bring her with you, she steals the RV when you're not looking, and you never see her or the RV again. No matter what you do, this is the last time Lee will ever see Lily again, after she kills Doug or Carly. At least he gives her the maddest death stare in the entire Telltale history. God damn. Not content with that traumatic experience, you now have to explain to Clementine that not only are Doug/Carly dead, but Duck is going to turn pretty soon. You can be honest, try to keep it light, or be blunt, or try to misdirect as much as you can. Either way, your parenting skills are on the line, so choose wisely.
There was no time for a burial.
Walkers?
Yeah. Horrible.
You get another nightmare sequence here, where Clementine turns and attacks you in a walker form. What's really freaky about this scene isn't so much that Clementine attacks you, but the fact that it's an action sequence with a QuickTime event. I didn't have the heart to do it because I thought for a second that Lee might have been fucking sleepwalking and he was like holding on to Clementine, and if I pressed Q too much, I might have like hit her or something. No, listen, I'm not going to do anything to harm this girl, even if it means zombie version of her eating on my corpse. Like, I'm just gonna, it is what it is, all right? My reason for living is now gone. I'll just go, all right, I don't want to do this no more. And then And then it clicked. It all just clicked in that moment. I don't want to keep living if Clementine is dead. Oh, why don't we remember that? Why don't we remember that? I can't live if Clementine dies. Noted. Let's make a note of that. Let's put a pin on that. Okay, let's move on. I can't live without Clementine. Whoa. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy. Makes you pretty quickly realize what Kenny and Katja are going through, knowing that Duck's going to turn pretty soon. I wonder what's going on in their heads right now. Like, maybe they're having the same thoughts I am, only worse, because this is their actual son here. This is their only reason for living. They have tried so hard to protect this kid, and now he will turn because he got bite in the fucking torso, in the belly. You can't cut that piece off. He's going to die. Kenny parks in front of a freight train, and you're quickly tasked with investigating and getting the thing moving. At some point, Lily will bolt with the RV here, so if you chose to bring her with you, this is where she leaves. Eventually, you work through the train in a little bit of a puzzle here and get it moving. When you go back to unhook the front of the train from the rest, you'll meet Chuck, a sole survivor who lives on the train. He was a hobo before the apocalypse. He's kind of a hobo now, but he's relatively well adjusted to life on the tracks, so he's a pretty friendly guy. Clearly, he's hiding something dark though, just can't put your finger on it. Once the train is ready to leave, it's time to deal with the duck question. If you don't insist on dealing with the duck question being, getting rid of him, you get to see one of the many bad endings to this game, one where Duck chomps on everyone. After some heaving and hawing, Kenny eventually breaks down and faces the facts. Duck's not going to survive the bite, and he needs to be put down, or he'll turn. Katja agrees to be the one to pull the trigger, and everyone gets to say their goodbyes in one of the most tragic scenes in the entire game. Kenny just breaks down, and it doesn't even end here. While you're consoling Clementine, you overhear the gunshot that marks that the deed has been done. You and Kenny both head on over to help Katja out, and you find her sprawled on the forest floor, next to a not dead duck, and she's got a bullet hole on her temple? What the fuck? Not only did Kenny have to come to terms with the death of his firstborn and only son, he's now looking at his wife's corpse, and his son's not even dead yet. What the fuck, Katja? That was some cold shit. Now you understand what I was saying earlier about whether Clementine dies. You can see how Katja would have made that decision, right? She kills herself because she can't accept the fact that Duck is dead. I just said to myself, I can't kill zombie Clementine, so I'm just going to let her kill me, because why would I even want to play a game without Clementine in it? And it was like in this moment where I realized, like, damn, they're onto something here. Like, they're fucking with us on a deep level. Like, this is crazy. They are playing with our heartstrings in ways that I still haven't even felt yet. They haven't, like, pushed the trigger, as we'll see in the very final scene of the game. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that scene. But already in Chapter 3, and of course in Chapter 2 with the whole, cannibal scene, like, I found myself already hooked on the fucking emotional draw of this game. That is the relationship between Lee and Clementine, which in some ways is the relationship between you and Clementine, and in a lot of ways is the relationship between you and Lee, which some might say is also as important as the one with you and Clementine. I would argue they're both as important. So, next is a choice that feels like it genuinely does matter. And thank God, because we need more of these. You actually have 3 choices here. You've had 3 choices all game long, but I'm going to bring up the 3rd choice now because I decided to make that 3rd choice right in this scene. And I don't know, y'all be the judge of this. I don't know if I'd even agree with myself, but let's just go through it. If you decide to overstay the dialogue, in other words, to do nothing, then you will open yourself to the choice that I ended up making in my most recent playthrough of the game, and in my first playthrough of the game when I was but a wee lad back in 2012. And apparently this choice was only made 17% of the time, making it relatively rare in comparison to the other 2 choices. And it's also the choice that feels the least satisfying of the 3, okay? Something about having a direct influence on Kenny's choice never sat well with me. When I was making this choice, I decided based on gut instinct. I don't want to be the one to tell Kenny to shoot his kid. I certainly don't want to be the one to shoot Kenny's kid. That just feels the worst one of them all. It just feels wrong because that's not my responsibility. I mean, it might look like I'm helping a friend, but that's like, you're taking away a huge responsibility from Kenny because you're trying to be nice, and that's really not what he needs right now. A real friend, a real bro in this situation would have either pushed Kenny to do the right thing or done what I did, which is let him decide, motherfucker. He's his own man. Let him choose his own battles. Let him make his own choices. And if you do that, if you choose to let Kenny make his own choice, he can't shoot Duck. He will not do it. Not telling him what to do, overstaying the dialogue, will always lead to the choice that Kenny makes, which is to leave Duck to turn. And that's exactly what happens. You just leave, and Duck is still alive. It feels wrong, but it also feels right. Like, I think we can all agree we'd prefer to have Duck be laid in rest, not walking around as a corpse. But pushing Kenny towards any direction is also not right. I don't know. If you know anything about this game's ending, then you've already figured out what choice I made in that same moment. So this is a teaser for that final choice. Heartbreaking, one that made a grown adult gamers pee their diaper wipies, so get ready. If you're crying here, you're going to be wailing at the end of it all. With Duck and Katja gone, our group has shrank significantly since the motel. Ben, Clementine, Kenny, and Lee are the only ones left from the original motel group. We might have gained a Chuck, but we've lost Lily, Doug, Carly, Katja, Duck, and of course Larry from the very beginning. Kenny continues to conduct the train? I don't fucking know. But he's clearly in a depressive state, so it's best to leave him to his own devices for now. You talk with Clementine, who's apparently been receiving some relatively mature advice from Chuck, which you confront him about, like, hey bro, am I picking up what you're putting down? I'm her father. Like, back off, dude. Step off, dude. He tells you plain face that you're a bit of a fucking terrible father and that he's seen too many kids die for him to let this happen to Clementine too. All right, she's a beacon of hope, not just for you, but for all the people around you now that Duck is gone. And if Lee doesn't get his shit together, that beacon won't last too long.
I don't mean to tell you how to do your job, but too many people have died already.
They have.
And seeing another little girl die might just do me in.
I hear you. A plan, a haircut.
Lee thinks about it for a moment, hears his advice, and, given what just happened to Duck, he's not going to take any chances. He'll take Chuck's advice to figure out a plan, cut Clementine's hair, and teach her how to shoot. These tend to be the best scenes of this game. You just get one-on-one time with Clementine to bond, build that relationship, and build up to that conclusion in episode 5. I think we all know why this is happening, right? We want that ending to hit, and it hits because we have so many scenes like this. Scenes that play out depending on your decisions, your dialogue. You cut her hair, teach her how to shoot, all these things are just great, okay? They're just great. You get to see how excited she is to go back to Savannah to see her parents, which is a bit of an awkward elephant in the room. Like, she really is looking forward to her parents, but are we going to break it to her that her parents are probably dead? Not yet, all right? We have to make her believe, right? We have to give her hope. There's really not much else I want to say about these scenes. They're just good. They're intimate, they're fun, they're enjoyable, they're human. What's not so good is that the revelation that Ben was the traitor from earlier kind of comes out of nowhere. He's been siphoning medicine for the bandits in exchange for his friends to not be harmed. Friends that haven't shown up in the game yet. Since Lee caught the trade just before the bandits were going to pick up the supplies, they attacked. That's why the bandit attack feels so sudden. They were already there. They were just going to take the medicine and leave. This all results in the events that eventually lead to Carly, Duck, Katja, Lily, all of these folks from leading the group for good. So you can imagine what Ben must be feeling right now. Some time on the road passes by and the train eventually halts in front of an oil tank blocking the road. We can't just ram through it, so the group makes a stop till we figure out what to do. Luckily, 2 friendly survivors show up to help, Christa and Omid. Christa is a bit apprehensive at trusting any strangers, but the first sight of Clementine gives both of them reason to help. Useless motherfuckers, though. They don't do shit! Lee and Clementine have to head over to this random-ass cabin, take out some walkers together, mind you, and then use the loot they find to cut out the oil tank. What exactly did Omid and Christa do in this whole effort? You introduce them to the group, they socialize for an hour and a half, and then you do literally everything. You and Clementine do literally everything. You make your escape. Omid jumps off the fucking thing. He clearly does not know how to use his legs because he breaks them. And you know what? It doesn't matter. This chapter was whack enough. Let's just move on and talk about it because holy shit is there stuff to talk about. Okay. Hold on. Before we do end up, there's a little voice coming from Clementine's walkie-talkie. And apparently they know Lee's name and they're coming to Savannah to find her parents. We don't have time for this shit. All right, let's move on. Okay, there are a lot of interesting themes that are going on at play here, okay? I want to talk about one character in particular because I promised to talk about them before we even started this chapter, so let's talk about him. Not Duck, not Kenny, and definitely not fucking Ben. Who gives a shit about Ben? No, it's Lily, all right? Lily is that character. Okay, I said earlier that I wanted to really look at Lily because if you really think about it for a second, she is, in a lot of ways, a mirror image of Clementine. Larry and Lily are Clementine and Lee, right? Straight up. There is parallels going on here. Parallels that are going to be present throughout the rest of the series, but parallels nonetheless. Not only are these two the only other father-daughter dynamics present in this first game, it's already very interesting to see how that relationship's already evolved in comparison to Lee, and in, adult form, right? Lily's not a little girl, but in a lot of ways, she is Larry's protector, not so much the other way around, where Lee is clearly Clementine's protector. So I feel like there's a lot of mechanics going on here between Lily and Lee, and that all kind of erupts with that scene on the highway. Makes it hard to sympathize with her, unless you're willing to see the relationship like that. If you're willing to see Lily as a Clementine, angry that her Lee has just died and that her killer gets to walk around all gung-ho like, I own the place. Oh my god, I am Kenny. Oh my god. Like, can we give this girl a break? Let's walk through that death again for a second so that you can kind of see it from Lily's perspective, all right? And let's try to picture this as Lee instead so that maybe we can justify it a little bit more, right? So Lee goes through a heart attack, or Larry gets a heart attack, right? He fucking dies, and the first instinct is to whack his ass with a salt lick, okay? Like, what the fuck? No effort from anyone to pick him up, try to help him, resuscitate him, nothing. It's the immediate first decision is to kill this guy, her father, who she's known all her life. Not content with that, we fucking drop a salt lick on the top half of his face. So Lily has to just sit there and look at her father's corpse with the bottom of his jaw sticking out in a bloody pulp. Isn't that gross? Isn't that a little disrespectful? We couldn't have done anything to maybe, lessen the impact of this trauma. You know what? What would be a little better for the scene? What would make this even more spicy? What if we looted Larry's corpse for coins so that we can escape? Oh yeah, those are the type of quick decisions that help form relationships in the group, all right? This is how you network in the professional world, all right? You kill the person's father, loot their corpse, and then tell her, you should get over it, girl. Like, come on, dude, you're being such a bitch. Like, get over it, bro. Come on, man. Your father was a dick, dude. Come on, think about the children. Think about the children. Like, is the fact that Lily, kind of keeps her composure after all of this, manages to lead the group well into the bandit camp invasion, and then she snaps because someone decides to steal from the group. It's like, I thought about all that, and I realized when I was a kid, when I played this game for the first time, I chose to, leave her by the road. Like, fuck this bitch, she killed my girlfriend, man. She just kissed me on the cheek. Like, you can't do that. Point is, I saw all of this, I thought about all this as I was playing the game, and it made more sense to me that Lily deserves a break. Okay, because she hasn't had one all fucking game long. She hasn't had a break, my guy. Not once. Not in a single moment. And to not give her a break feels wrong. It feels unjust. I know she kills Carly. And interesting here to note, there's actually a dynamic between how she kills Doug and Carly. She kills Carly on purpose, whereas she kills Doug on accident. I find that very interesting because it kind of changes Lily's motivation in a second, because she's ultimately right about Ben, right? She is right. Ben did betray the group. Is it reason to shoot him in the face? No. All right, that's not justifiable, okay? But given the fact that she shoots Carly in cold blood, that I think adds an extra layer to the unforgivenness, if that's a word, about her murder, about Lily shooting Carly. Because that feels evil, you know? Whereas her shooting of Doug doesn't feel so evil because, one, she's right about Ben, and two, she doesn't mean to shoot to kill Doug, and three, she deserves a fucking break, for fuck's sake. The choice between Carly and Doug pays off in this scene, as it completely recontextualizes Lily's motivations depending on who you picked. Individually, the decision to save them is meaningless, now that you know that they were going to die anyway, but at least we end up with a different perspective on dismissing Lily. Maybe if you'd gone with Doug, you'd be more sympathetic to Lily, knowing it was an accident, whereas if you'd saved Carly, you may not have been as forgiving, seeing as she basically sucker punches her.
You're not coming with us.
I'll die out here.
I don't care.
Did you ever care, Lee?
You're a murderer, Lily.
You're a murderer, Lily. You're a murderer, Lily. We can't have you with us.
This episode culminates into the massive dissolution of the group. Founding members get killed, others get exiled. Generally speaking, this whole chapter is about tragedy and the consequences of paranoia, disloyalty, and despair. We're still only a little over halfway through the game, so there's plenty of room for The Walking Dead to continue examining those themes. But so far, it's done a damn good job of forcing players to have a stake in the game. Whether that's the personal attachment to Clementine, to Kenny, to Carly, to anyone really. I don't think there's ever a more solid unit in Season 1 of The Walking Dead. This original squad feels so classic. It feels like a family. Now it's gone, and in Episode 4, we'll have to see how those characters adapt to this trauma, how those survivors adapt to this trauma, and if they're able to get out of it stronger and better for it.
You'll never get over today.
That's all I keep thinking.
Try to think about what's ahead of you.
That's why I keep thinking it.
I'll leave you to your thoughts.
Episode 4 begins with the group having freshly arrived in the city of Savannah, Georgia. They're on the lead of an eerie voice on the other side of Clementine's walkie-talkie, though Kenny is much more concerned with finding a boat to sail away with. Ben and Chuck are chillin', but Omid is barely hanging on after injuring his leg right before the last chapter ended. Not too long after the episode starts, we overhear some church bells ringing nearby. Lee gets a glimpse at someone who might be the cause of this, but there's bigger problems ahead. The walkers, and lots of them. In a short instant, Ben and Clementine are totally surrounded, and instead of protecting Clem, Ben runs out like a little bitch as the zombies close in. Strike one, Ben.
God damn it!
You're able to help Clementine, but Chuck isn't so fortunate. The hobo from the last chapter who taught you some sage advice is separated from the group. He knows how to handle himself, though, and helps you get away by attracting the walkers to him, telling you to go away and run and leave him behind. The group is able to escape into the backyard of a mansion, where they're able to get some respite from the walker horde, but no sign of Chuck, or at least not for now. The mansion's fortified, so it's up to you to find a way in. Since we finished 2 back-to-back chapters with humans at the center of the conflict, this chapter is a return to form, as zombies are placed in the foray from beginning to end. The backyard is the first free roam section of the episode, allowing you to catch up with the characters and progress the plot at your own pace. See if Omid and Christa are okay. See if Clementine's okay. See if Kenny's okay. He's still not at all recovered from Duck and Koch's death, and the guilt of letting Duck go is definitely weighing over him, if that was the choice that was made. Doubly so if the trigger was pulled instead. You can also scold Ben for ditching Clementine earlier.
I don't know what happened. I just froze up. Hasn't that ever happened to you?
Just hear what I'm saying to you. You put that girl in danger again, it won't be walkers you have to worry about.
Zoinks!
Once you're done mingling, Lee can progress this section by digging up a dead dog from the backyard and using its collar to unlock the doggy door to the mansion. Pretty neat technology. Clementine will then just rush in and unlock the house for you, continuing this section inside of the mansion. It's here where the group will temporarily set up base. Lee quickly surveys the house to make sure there aren't any straggling zombies left behind. Turns out there is one. The attic houses a young boy who starved to death, presumably when his parents left or when they died during the collapse of the city. His parents are nowhere to be found, but he's here in the attic. Kenny finds him here first. The kid's resemblance to Duck causes Kenny to freeze up when he sees him. You get an opportunity to grow your relationship with Kenny here. Obviously, the context for Kenny's suffering will have changed depending on how you handle the Duck question. You could argue that since Duck didn't die in my playthrough, it's doubly important for Kenny to have some closure here, with the decision to put the child to rest. Had Kenny killed Duck, it might even be the opposite. You could argue that maybe Kenny having to put another kid out of its zombified misery is just too heartbreaking of a decision. Maybe it's best if you step in and finish him off for Kenny. Either way, having Kenny put him down ends up being the correct choice. Doing so will grow your relationship to him significantly, where not doing it or letting the kid die, like having Christa come up and do it for him, will harm your relationship to Kenny instead. After this incident, you get the chance to rebury the dog from earlier, with the kid you just put down. It's a bit of a somber scene, with Lee alone in the backyard, digging up 2 of the previous tenants of this house before everything went to shit. It's a slow scene, but effective. It reinforces the tragedy of the apocalypse, reminding you that a lot of people have died since the start of this whole thing, kids included. In fact, this is the second dead kid we've had to put down, or think about since the last chapter. It's no coincidence that as you're doing this scene, Clementine looks over to Lee as he's burying the corpse. Lee is probably thinking that this could be Clementine next if he's not careful. After you tour the mansion a little bit, Kenny gets fed up with waiting around. He demands to search the pier for a working boat and doesn't intend to stay any longer until he does. You tell Ben to watch over Clementine and head out with Kenny to the Savannah pier. It's here where, as expected, most of the boats are either gone or destroyed. Kenny tries his best to fix a boat that might still be salvageable, but no dice. Lee spots what seems to be a barrier built with walker corpses, definitely a gruesome sight. It seems like the people of Savannah were able to form some sort of community, and this may have been a wall for that community, a barrier to separate society from, well, Zombieland. It's at this moment where Lee spots that figure from before, parkouring their way through the streets. Kenny and Lee try to ambush the mysterious figure, but they quickly get the upper hand, nearly killing Lee before Clementine's able to stop them. Clementine's appearance seems to dissuade this person, who reveals themselves to be a young woman by the name of Molly. That's great and all, but how the fuck was Clementine able to sneak out of the mansion alone and avoid the walkers the whole time? And what was Ben doing? I told that piece of shit to watch Clementine. For fuck's sake, Ben. Strike two. Strike 2 for you, Ben. Molly's been responsible for ringing the church bells all over town. She does it to attract zombies away while she's looting. She explains that this zombie wall was constructed by Crawford, a community that sprung up shortly after the apocalypse started, but eventually started to get weirdly culty and eugenicsy. This kind of behavior forced a culling out on the sick and elderly, including children. Anything or anyone that wasn't able to take care of themselves was immediately extricated, exiled, or just eliminated from the group.
No children, no elderly, no one with an advanced medical condition. Basically, no one who might be a burden on the community. Crawford's all about the survival of the fittest. That's how they survived, while the rest of the world went to shit around them.
This is how Molly was able to tell that you and Kenny weren't from around here. Clementine's a dead giveaway. During the scuffle from before, Kenny accidentally shoots his gun while trying to fight off Molly, and now the noise is catching up to the group. Walkers over here corner the squad. With Molly's help, though, Kenny and Clem are able to escape through the rooftops. Lee, on the other hand, is not so lucky. He needs to go through the sewers if he wants to escape the zombies. Going through the sewers is a quick puzzle section, and you even get to see what happened to Chuck after he escaped from the group. Seems like he wasn't able to make it out of the zombies, and he inevitably shot himself when he knew there was no way that he was getting out of these sewers alive. You make your way through the sewers and find a hole in the wall leading to a group of survivors, cancer patients that survived Crawford's cull of the sick and elderly. Vernon here is the leader of the group, and you need to dissuade him from shooting you in the face, otherwise he'll shoot you in the fucking face. Once Lee shows that he's not the enemy, you can use Vernon's help to get back to the mansion. When you return, Vernon goes off to treat Omid. He's a doctor, so he knows what he's doing. Omid's leg has gotten infected, and not like in a walker infected type of way, but more like the bacteria infected, you know what I mean? Didn't we have a liquor bottle just hanging around earlier? We could have used that to disinfect the wound, am I wrong? Whatever. Clementine seems to be missing, so you search around the house to find her, and there she is, inside the cabin outside. Along with a giant-ass, fully intact fucking boat. Good job, Clementine. Seems like the tides have turned for the group. Now we can get this ship sailing, with just a new battery and some gasoline. The gang organizes a plan to raid Crawford for parts. And by raid, I mean sneak through the sewers and take shit when nobody's looking. Vernon brings Bree along, another cancer patient. She'll be useful to better map out the Crawford settlement, specifically where the supplies are located, since she was a part of the community so long ago. You get the choice here to bring Clementine along for the raid. She showed to be pretty capable in this chapter, and even though Omid could use the extra protection, I'm a little bit afraid that he'll reanimate instead, and it'll just be a fight between Omid and Clementine. Yeah, I don't want to risk that. I decided to bring her along, much to the dismay of the rest of the team. Kenny pulls you aside for a moment. We're going to need a bigger boat if we want to carry all of these people. The ship can only hold 5, meaning that even without Molly and the cancer group, we'd still be one Ben too many. We'll think about this later, says Lee, and the group sets out to raid Crawford. It's quiet. Too quiet. This whole first chunk of the chapter has been building up to Crawford, and how they execute the elderly, and cull the weak, and fucking eat babies. I mean, maybe not that bad, but surely it's not as bad as it seems. Well, it turns out that Crawford's actually been extinct for some time. When you arrive at the settlement, it's abandoned and completely ridden with zombies. This is good news, though. It's much easier to deal with walkers than guns and bullets. The group sneaks into the school where the supplies are held. We split up into teams of 2. Kenny and Bree head to the gas depot to fetch gas. Christa and Vernon head to the infirmary for medical supplies for Omid and the other cancer patients. Lee and Molly go to the car shop for a battery, and Ben and Clementine stay back in the safe room to try to unlock this armory door. Even Clementine questions this decision. Ben's been kind of lousy this episode. You reassure her by saying that Clementine's in charge, so you don't gotta worry about nothing. You get a chance to learn a little bit more about Molly on this trip with her. She seems to have some beef with the people of Crawford, and is clearly a former associate of the community or something. I don't know. Maybe she was a former member. Maybe she was Crawford. I don't know. You quickly find the battery and make a close escape with Molly, who withholds the battery from you till all the other stuff is collected. She doesn't want you to just leave without her, you know. Clever girl. Kenny and Bree are able to fetch the gas, but they're chased by some zombies right as you find them. You're forced to block the door with your axe in order to stop them. The last step is to help Christa and Vernon at the nurse's station, killing some zombies and then entering. We'll let you uncover some of the truth behind Crawford's eugenics program. You see some recordings here of a girl who got pregnant and was given the option to either abort the baby or be exiled from the settlement. It seems like the mother wants to keep the baby though, and in a subsequent recording, you see her lunge at the doctor after another attempt at terminating her pregnancy. It's implied that this was the act that caused the settlement to fall apart. It just so happens that this was the doctor that Molly was beating up in the street from earlier too. Christa is visibly bothered by this whole recording. It's not a coincidence that this whole section offers a lot of reference to pregnancy, particularly with Christa. She's been visibly sick for a few scenes now, and she highlights a sonogram if you choose to look at it. Not to mention her visible disgust at this whole sequence, forcing a parent to have an abortion just to stay in the community. It clearly makes her upset. Just as an aside, this dude's a whole doctor, yet he's wearing a loaded gun to the examination room. It's fair to say that this dude's not practicing his Hippocratic Oath anymore. In any case, it should be pretty obvious by now that Christa is pregnant. You can investigate further, alone this time, uncovering a third recording where you see Molly performing favors for the scumbag doctor from before. She's been trading sex for diabetic medicine. Molly's sister needs it to survive, but as we've learned from this group, the whole trade necessitates some secrecy from her disease, or else she could get exiled or worse. The recording shows the last session that Molly had with the doctor, where he breaks the news that he can no longer sneak her medicine for his own safety. When you find this out, Molly will return from her trip, and you can tell her all about what you found. She'll confess to it all, and admit that she only came to Crawford to retrieve a picture of her sister that she left behind. She'll also reveal that, following the recording, Molly's sister died soon after, seemingly at the hands of Crawford, not the disease itself. This spite against the group caused her to eventually leave Crawford for good, until now. Ben comes up to you and tells you that he needs something to break into the lock of the armory. He finds an axe wedged in between a pair of door handles. The same axe you used to stop the... Oh, what the fuck, Ben? If you brought Clem along, she'll save Molly from a walker here. Nice shot. If you didn't bring Clementine along, then you'll need to save Molly herself, and failing to do so causes her to separate from the group. Not die, but you'll never see her again at this point. You run back into the safe room where Ben has the genius idea to confess to Katja and Duck's death, right as walkers are beating down the doors. Ben's really not making a case for himself here.
Wait a minute. What are you saying? It was me who made the deal with the bandits at the motor inn, slipping them supplies. I thought maybe I could keep them off our backs. When it got discovered, that's when they attacked. And that's when Duck...
You're able to get the door open, and after a brief action sequence where you escape from the walkers in this bell tower, you're able to make your way out through the rooftops. Right before this, though, Ben gets grabbed by a walker, and you're given the choice to either abandon him or save him. Both Kenny and Ben himself tell you to abandon him. Kenny because, he's a little spiteful right now and is trying to be opportunistic, knowing that not everyone can fit on the boat. Ben is clearly remorseful and thinks he can atone for his sins if he makes the sacrifice play here. Depending on your choice, Ben can actually die here, straight up. I never felt comfortable killing him, though. It doesn't really make much sense given that you can very much kill him and there's no consequence for doing so. Even if Ben did majorly fuck up this entire episode, a grand total of 4 fucking times. Yeah, that's 4 fucking times Ben put other people's lives at risk. I chose to save Ben anyway, because it just didn't feel conclusive to Kenny or Ben's characters. And again, because you can actually save him. Like, there's no consequence to saving. There's nothing stopping you from doing so. I'm not some little angel myself, but even I know that Ben's just a young guy. He's cowardly, sure, but killing him makes this no different from the cult in Crawford. I think that's the lesson to learn from this interaction, isn't it? One quick look at the decision tree and you'll find that 55% of players let him die? A little over half of you motherfuckers just dropped Ben? Seriously? Jesus Christ, okay, alright, well, at least the game lets you do it. You head back to the mansion after this. The medicine you retrieved is enough to help Omid get better. However, during the escape, Bree managed to get herself caught by the walkers. Vernon pulls you aside and tells you the same spiel that Chuck said on the train earlier. Depending on your interaction with him throughout the chapter, he'll either praise you or scold you for your leadership decisions, ultimately culminating in the offer to take Clementine in.
Now just hold on a damn minute. Listen.
No, you listen. You got some good people here, and they look to you as their leader. Well, I'm here to tell you, the kind of leader you are, they're not gonna make it much longer. And you're kidding yourself if you think putting them all on a boat is gonna solve anything. Now, you may not care about all of those people, but I know you care about that little girl. Which is why I'm gonna make you an offer.
What kind of an offer?
I'll take her off your hands. Take her back with me, to my people. We're well supplied, well hidden, and a lot of us have had kids of our own. And now Crawford's fallen, we got nothing left to fear from them.
I beg your pardon?
The sheer audacity of this old, cancer-ridden dingleberry of a man to try to take Clementine from me? Alright, this was the first time in the entire series where I acted out. I went the full hostile route. Well, second time if you consider the death stare I gave Lily in the last episode. And the fuck you at the St. John's for yoinking Clementine earlier. Okay, I guess I've acted out a couple times throughout this season. But I told Vernon how it was, okay? There is no chance in hell that you're going to take Clementine away from me. And not for, emotional reasons, because let's think about this for a second, okay? Bad leader, by the way. I thought I'd done a pretty good job, keeping the group together, considering the circumstances. I thought I was more than justified by saving Ben. Bringing Clementine was a net gain, too. We managed to save Molly thanks to her. And this dude still hates me for all that? All because I was acting a little bit more threatening in our first interaction? Seriously? Spiteful little... And what's this about his group being safer? Last time I was in the sewers, I saw the other motherfucker that told me I was a bad father neck deep in a zombie platter. What's a group of old, disabled, cancer patients going to do that a 6 foot tall, fully grown adult man in prime shape can't? After this whole argument, you get a final sequence with Clementine. You haven't been forward about finding her parents, and this is the last time she's going to bring it up. You can lie to her here and tell her that we'll find them. Or be honest. Either way, she'll bawl her eyes out. It seems like her priorities aren't being taken into consideration, and it's here where she breaks down. I'm going to pull us aside again because there's a really cool moment long before this scene happens where Vernon asks you if Clementine's your daughter. You can say yes or no to this question. It doesn't have any significant repercussions here, but Telltale does something interesting with this moment. Yes or no are highlighted like normal. But here, in this scene that we were just looking at, where Clementine asks you about finding her parents, saying that you will find them has the very clear and visible tag that this is a lie, that you're lying to Clementine. But the point is that this scene has a yes and a no. The scene with Vernon has a yes and a no. But the scene with Clementine has a yes lie and a no like normal. So, I mean, do I need to spell it out? Lee genuinely sees Clementine as his daughter by this point. Blood related or otherwise, it doesn't matter. To him, saying yes that Clementine is his daughter is not a lie. The bond is so strong that you can say yes or no to this and still be completely truthful. Pretty cool. Just thought I would mention it. I like that little detail. Right after this, though, Clementine goes missing. Lee finds her walkie-talkie outside of the gates, but is bit by a walker trying to retrieve it. Oh boy. You can choose to reveal the walker bite to the group at this point. This honesty warms you to Christa and Omid. The next sequence is the most important scene in episode 4. One where you attempt to convince all of the group members to join arms and find Clementine together. So far in this chapter, you've had the options to get closer to Kenny, Ben, Christa, and Omid, and, of course, Clementine. Your decisions in episode 1 through 4 help you get closer to Kenny. Your recent choices with Ben and Christa help solidify them to your side. Depending on all of these choices throughout the game, they will join you to help find Clementine. There's many ways to fuck this up. In fact, at the end of this scene, you'll get to see where other players ended up, and you can really get every possible combination. Some players ended up with just Kenny. Some ended up with just Ben. Others went at it alone, and if you're a good little boy like me, all 4 of them will join you. It's pretty cool that there's finally a culmination to all your choices. You really won't see more of Ben if he dies in that scene earlier. He just won't be an option anymore. Kenny will just ditch you if you've been antagonizing him all game and all chapter long. Hiding your bite wound will make Christa and Omid less willing to help you out. Or, opposite of that, showing your wound will basically lock them in and trust you completely. Pretty cool. The game ends on that note, with Clementine seemingly kidnapped, perhaps by the guy on the walkie-talkie, harassing you since episode 3, and we'll have to see what his true intentions are. And if Clementine even got kidnapped at all, she might have just ditched the group, seeing as nobody cared about her parents. What's going to happen to Lee? He's been bitten after all. In the wrist, which, if you know anything about zombie media, there's a very, very simple solution to a bite mark in this particular region of the body. So is there really even anything to worry about? Guess we'll see. Before we jump to episode 5, though, I want to talk about episode 4, and I want to talk about Clementine in particular. Clementine and Lee's relationship hasn't really been very dynamic in the first 3 chapters of the game. Sure, there's plenty of room to fail and fuck up, but even those decisions which affected your relationship to Clementine, like killing the St. John's in front of her or keeping your past from her, they're really hardly as directly aggressive as they become in this episode. In Chapter 4, this relationship becomes a bit more complicated. I don't know if this was a last-minute pivot in the story by Telltale to force some sort of tension between Lee and Clementine, or if Chapter 4 deliberately meant to act as a turning point in their relationship. Because starting from Chapter 4, you can start scolding Clementine for acting irresponsibly and for just generally disobeying Lee.
Don't ever do that again.
I was only trying to help.
That's not the point. That was dangerous and stupid. You don't know what might be in there.
Likewise, Clementine will start being more confrontational with Lee, questioning the group's decisions in the soft-spoken ways that she does. She particularly disagrees with group's handling of Ben, especially if you've chosen to kill him.
Clem, honey, what's wrong?
What happened to Ben? What did Kenny mean when he said you did what you had to?
Clementine, this may be hard to understand right now, but sometimes for the good of everyone, we have to make tough choices. Ben was putting us all in danger in Crawford, so I made a decision. and I left him behind. I know that sounds bad, but I had to think about the whole group, not just one person.
But I'm just one person.
Not to me, you're not.
You don't have too many opportunities to really dig at Clementine and overreact like the scene with the doggy door, but there are plenty of opportunities in this chapter to really screw up your relationship with Clementine in subtle ways that'll affect the ending you get. My problem with this particular portion of the game, this focus on starting to act a bit more antagonistic with everyone, not just Clementine, but Ben, Kenny, Vernon, and whoever, is that there's little in the way of interesting consequences if you do so, if you approach the game in a way that makes you more aggressive. It seems like the right answer every single time, the one that Telltale wants you to take whenever these choices can be made, is just be nice. Every choice with everyone is just a matter of, were you honest? Did you ask nicely? Were you empathetic? Did you say please and thank you? The root choices aren't pragmatic, strategic, or factual in any way. They're just that. Mean choices that seem to only alienate you from the person you're talking to. I think there had to have been a better way to teach Clementine a lesson without sounding like a total asshole and without sounding like Barney the fucking dinosaur. I don't understand why you wouldn't just pick to praise Clementine every chance you get. Sure, she has her flaws, but it seems like every chance she gets to do something in this episode, she'll either save a life or unlock a path for the group. Nothing she does acts as a detriment to the group. So why would I scold her? You'd think her irrational approach to danger and her willingness to disobey Lee is reason enough, but scolding her makes you seem like a dick. It makes you a dick. It doesn't generate the appropriate response from Clementine, which could be something like teaching her a lesson. But instead, it feels like you're emotionally scarring the relationship with every opportunity you get to be mean or to scold her. You may start to question at this point, what did Telltale intend by these decisions? By this, fairly simple spectrum of morality with Clementine? There's no nuance with these choices, or at least none that I could tell. Don't you think the game would be better off if the choices did have some positive impact, even if it meant lowering your relationship with your team members? The immediate one I could think of was the choice to drop Ben off of the bell tower. Why would I ever decide to leave him behind? Because he's a screw-up? Because I wanted to see what would happen? Because he betrayed the team 2 episodes ago? To me, this choice felt the least reasonable to make, and yet a lot of players decided to drop his ass, which makes me think, damn, maybe I missed something about Ben's character that others got to see. Why would I let him die, The pragmatic choice, I guess, would be to, the fact that you can't fit more than 5 people on this boat. So, since he's willing to make the sacrifice play for the team, we'd be knocking 2 birds with 1 stone here. And Ben's been fucking up the whole season long, so I would expect that, maybe this is a great moment to finally rid ourselves from this motherfucker. That would be great, though, if we all got on a boat at the end of the game. But we don't, and saving Ben prolongs his life by a single episode, so we're really entering a Carly Doug situation with Ben here. We've saved him for now. But that's the sort of practical thing that I think the scolding options could have used more of. Maybe if you were more frequent with the scolding to Clementine, she'll leave the group and find her parents on her own. Sure, that sucks, but having scolded her, she's maybe more capable of surviving on her own, even if it was the hard way. This makes me think of BioShock, not Infinite, but the original game. You had this whole game to either save or consume the atom from Little Sisters. Depending on how often you harvest the atom from the Little Sisters, you're treated to an entirely different ending. Not to spoil it, but there are objectively morally good endings and a set of morally bad endings. You get way more powerful in the game itself if you choose to harvest the Little Sisters, giving you a tangible, beneficial reason to go out of your way to be a bit more morally dark. Though this locks you out of the good ending, even if you just do it once. Both of these games go the black or white route, but at least BioShock is a teeny little bit more nuanced with how it presents its bad choices. And, it directly implements those choices in the gameplay, just as much as in the story. The Walking Dead isn't really expected to have any significant gameplay changes when these choices are made, but it sucks that the narrative impacts don't exist either. Another example, okay? Fable 3. With all its flaws and all its false promises, at least it had a cool idea when you got to the point of running your kingdom. Generally speaking, you can decide the fate of your kingdom based on choices on how you run it. The more fascistic and capitalistic you lean, the more money you'll have and the more lives you'll save, but the people will hate you. The more collectivist and humanitarian you go, the more your people will love you, but your economy will just completely be in the gutter and more people are going to die in the final section of the game. Technically, you could buy the entire kingdom off before you get to this part, letting you be nice and save everyone, but I'll give the game the benefit of the doubt and assume that we're thinking about it the way the game was intended to be played. Do you see then that there is a give and take with every decision in Fable 3? Sure, it's not perfect, okay? The choices themselves would obviously be way more complicated in real life, but for the sake of simplicity and, for the sake of the game itself, given it's a very simplified version of running a kingdom, I thought that this was an excellent way to make tangible decisions with significant impacts on the outcome of the kingdom and its story. Telltale doesn't allow for much of this in The Walking Dead, and it's a game about the choices you make. It feels like it could have been so much better with this particular chapter. Solely, though, around how the dialogue shifts to these options to scold Clementine, to antagonize Kenny, to kill Ben. You're literally responsible for his death in this chapter. What do these choices accomplish that benefit the group? Nothing. Because ultimately your choices don't matter, and because there's no logical reason to make these negative choices. I know I said I wouldn't bring up that choices don't matter anymore, but I did say that, during that long spiel earlier, that part of the appeal of flavorful choices, the ones that really don't affect the plot, but give you some time to think, they did that, right? They made you think. They made you seriously contemplate the decision you were making. The act of making a choice, there's the value, right? Remember that? Here, though, there was no serious thinking, okay? There was no value in the choices themselves. I knew immediately that killing Ben felt wrong. I knew I couldn't just let go and let him die, knowing I could have saved him. Likewise, how could I tell Clementine off after she opens the door for us? After she saves my ass from Molly? After she saves Molly's ass from walkers right after? The choice to leave her behind or bring her with you was, admittedly, significantly better. I thought about how letting her stay could jeopardize her own life if Omid turned, but bringing her along would be sort of irresponsible, Okay, this one's getting me thinking. But the rest of these choices, the constant douchebaggery from Lee, it's just so unwarranted, so unjustified. No lessons get learned here. Not with Clementine, at least, who should, by this point, be the most important character to influence besides Lee himself. With Kenny, Ben, and Christa, it felt better that, at the end, you find out that your antagonism to them could very literally lead them to just ditch you when Clementine goes missing. Okay, so there's a give and take here. There's a reason not to act like a dick. I think episode 4 is the weakest in the whole season. For some reason, I remember thinking this episode was mostly filler for the conclusive 5th episode where shit really hits the fan. Upon a fresh replay, though, I found that the problems with this episode were more than just being a fairly bland bridge between episode 3 and 5. The entire premise of scolding Clementine makes no sense. At least, it was handled in a way that offered no nuance or reasoning behind the scolding itself. Sometimes the praising itself also felt overdone. Saying nothing felt like the better option, but now it just seems awkward, like there's just no real right answer here. There is stuff to praise though, okay? I like that we paused with the human threat for a single episode. It felt like we were leading up to this massive shootout again with the Crawford settlement, only to be treated to an empty settlement with a lot of history. I thought that was awesome. I also thought that Lee getting bitten was an excellent way to leave us hanging, especially because this pays off in episode 5 for all the worst reasons, which kind of subverted my own expectations, but we'll talk more about that in the next section. My beef with The Walking Dead, Season 1, Episode 4 in particular, is that it has a bit of an identity crisis. It's not sure what to do with Lee and Clementine yet, and it knows that by Episode 5, these two are going to have some climactic goodbye whether or not you treated her like trash. So, it really can't get away with a total collapsing of the relationship, which makes this whole awkward tension between them just non-existent. It doesn't make any sense. This antagonism by Lee will pretty much just disappear in the next chapter, not just because Clementine makes less of an appearance, but because there's just no way that the game can end with the premise that Lee and Clementine are sort of broken up. They're too tied to one another for that to happen, and I think the developers knew that when they were writing the 5th season, but seemingly forgot when it came to episode 4.
The boat's not big enough for all of us. Somebody's got to get left behind. Might as well be this piece of shit right here.
Well, I vote we leave him. I'm sorry, Ben. I know you mean well, but all I want to do is get back to Omid, and you put that at risk.
Wait, don't I get a vote?
Of course you do.
Ben's nice. He's my friend. We don't leave friends behind. That's my vote.
On second thought, I think I'm gonna abstain. Lee?
Episode 5 of The Walking Dead is the shortest of the 5 episodes of the whole game, and for many reasons may just be the best one of them all. No Time Left begins right where episode 4 concluded. Lee's been bitten, and one of the first things we need to do is figure out how to handle this situation. We all know where this is going, so let's just skip to that part. When Lee passes out due to some of the symptoms of the zombie bite, the rest of the gang restrain him and place him on a hospital bed. This is, again, the same hospital area where Vernon and his gang were staying at. The group still thinks Vernon was responsible for Clementine's kidnapping, but I think the player knows that the true culprit is this stranger, a third element yet to reveal themselves. They're the true kidnapper. Regardless, Lee wakes up seconds before Kenny begins amputating his arm. We get the choice to go through with the amputation. You can go the rest of this episode with or without your arm, but most players elect to cut it off, presumably because it could save Lee's life. Lee doesn't die from the actual amputation, but he does have to complete a wide variety of physical tasks with only one arm now. The scene right after this highlights just how much this amputation forces Lee to make some pretty serious endeavors with just one arm. Lee has to climb a huge elevator shaft just after this incident. The slow, methodical climb of which makes me think that Telltale expected most players to cut his arm off. Lee and the gang find their way onto the hospital rooftop, where we can see the horde that had followed the gang ever since we met Christa and Omid by the train tracks. They've just been wandering in the railroad's direction this whole time, and have just now found their way to Savannah. The entire city is swarmed with zombies, and there is seemingly no way to get off this rooftop without getting yourself face first into the walker horde. But wait, of course, the church bells. Molly used them to attract walkers and run away in the other direction. If Lee rings these bells over here, the whole group can escape from the other side of the building. Lee concocts his plan by grabbing a conveniently placed ladder and using it as a bridge to reach the church bells. Now, this is going to be a recurring trend this chapter. If Lee decides to get amputated, he'll still be the one expected to handle all of these difficult physical tasks. I get that climbing the ladder earlier was absolutely necessary, but did Lee really have to be the one to cross this ladder bridge, then make the jump across? We do a lot of roof jumping in this chapter, and nobody bothers to help pull Lee up or grab him by the ledge if his jump is short. What the fuck is going on with this team? It's nice to have all of this moral support as a reward for the last chapter's decisions, but as it turns out, none of these motherfuckers actually do anything to help you get to Clementine. It's pretty much all Lee once again. Whatever, not a big deal. Lee gets away with his one-arm shenanigans anyway, and eventually, the team is able to ring the bell and get away from the hospital. They make their way to the manor from the last chapter. It's here where the group finds out that Vernon and the Cancer Gang have run away with the ship. It's worth noting that once you return back to the manor, everyone who didn't join you in the ending of the last chapter will rejoin your group, so another case of choices not meaning much in this game. What's worse is that the group finally figures out that Clementine is with the stranger from the radio, not with Vernon. So the new plan is to make their way to the hotel where Clementine's parents were staying at. It seems that Clementine was lured there by the stranger, or at least she was grabbed right outside the manor since her hat was found on the street floor. Clementine would never leave without that hat. The discovery of the missing boat puts Kenny in a frenzy, and he immediately lashes out to the nearest victim, in this case Ben. Well, in most cases, it's gonna be Ben. He finally stands up for himself, though, telling Kenny off and confessing that he's been dealing with his own sense of grief, one that he's been shouldering from the rest of the group since before we'd even met him.
No! You know how they died. You've said goodbye. I never got to see my family, my parents, my little sister. Do you get that? Your family is gone, but at least you had them to lose. I never made it home.
It seems this realization that Ben has no clue if his family is alive or dead helps light an empathy bulb in Kenny's brain. He immediately chills out on Ben and realizes that even someone as prone to mistakes as him had something in their life before this apocalypse, and he's had to survive it essentially alone. The closest thing he has to family is this group. Kenny, Lee, Clementine, and yet he's constantly on the receiving end of some pretty serious harassment by Kenny. You could also be on that side of the fucking harassment chain too, telling him he's pretty much a waste of space if you want. Where's his family? What if the tables were turned? Ben's a teenager too, you know. He's probably got as much experience in the adult world as Clementine does, yet he's expected to handle the same amount of trauma and responsibility as anybody else. Is that fair? Of course it's fair. He has to handle himself, and he does. Ben's not the type of annoying teenage character that willingly puts the team at risk for some cliched sense of rebellion or angst. He's just a fuck-up. A human, perhaps the most human character in the story filled with zombies, and you can be directly responsible with his death and never be able to see this side of him that begs to be respected, despite his flaws. For once they were willing to let the player completely miss out on entire chunks of content through a decision. We'll never get to see this side of Ben if you make that choice to kill him off in Chapter 4. Didn't mean to go on a Ben ramble there, but I liked this scene quite a bit. It made me think of Clementine, who ran away primarily to find her parents. I'm sure Ben would love to do the same, but he's a bit more pragmatic in accepting that maybe his family is gone. It helped justify Clementine's decision too, and offer some parallels to both these characters, and maybe how different the player might feel towards these two characters despite the fact that their goals are largely the same. Though I guess the major difference here is that Clementine's parents are right across the road and Ben's family is somewhere else in the country. Not a lot of options to make that trek now, are there? Moving on, the manor is pretty quickly attacked by the horde, and we get this cool moment where the squad has to lay waste to the few zombies that charge in. Some Left 4 Dead ass shit right here. For the first time in the entire game, the group runs out of bullets and is forced to take cover inside the attic. We get a short respite up here where the group catches their breath while figuring out what to do next. So much for catching their breath though. Kenny and Lee get into an argument about what to do if Lee turns. Kenny recalls what happened to Larry back in episode 2. If Lee passes out again, what are the chances he'll come back as a zombie? You can handle this argument in different ways, but it should be clear by now that episode 5 won't have too many significant changes or plot crazy choices, with the only exception being the final conclusion of this game. This argument won't cause Kenny to leave or anything, nor will it cause a permanent wedge in Lee and Kenny's relationship, and is really just a way to build some drama with Lee's bite situation, which is even more drastic, you know, if Lee never cut his hand off. In this fit of rage, Kenny smashes a hole in the wall with a statue. Relatively easily too, making everyone realize that the walls are pretty much rotten. Giving it a few whacks should open a way out. The group takes turns hammering at the wall, which allows for a few more moments of rest before we need to keep moving on. You sit by Christa and talk about the last couple of minutes of gameplay and story, about how Ben finally stood up for himself, about who Larry was and why we needed to deal with him, and ultimately about Clementine and who's going to take care of her if Lee doesn't make it out of this alive. There's a bit of push and pull between Christa and Lee. It seems like she's not totally convinced on the idea of taking Clementine in, nor is Lee really hooked on the idea of giving up Clem. But I think both of them understand what she symbolizes in a world as fucked up as this one. And I think Christa has had enough time with Clementine to feel like she's partly responsible for her, even if Lee is her total 100% protector. When Kenny comes back from hitting the wall, he tags Omid in. We get a bit more dialogue about these same topics, the game adds more obvious hints that Christa is super pregnant, and eventually Kenny recognizes, well, while a total fuck-up, Ben has had it pretty tough even before they'd ever met him. In any case, Omid eventually opens the way forward, and the group finds themselves in the next building over. It's here where we find a dead couple, seemingly deceased from a suicide pact of some sort. This reminds Kenny of what Katjaa did. You might have thought that, given everything that's happened to Kenny, that it's kind of surprising that he's never had any suicidal thoughts of his own. Kenny gets a chance to reflect on what Katjaa did here, highlighting some of his own values about giving up, and the slight selfishness and cowardice that he sees in people who decide to not even try to survive. I don't really know if I totally agree with what Kenny is saying here, but I'm impressed by how much he simultaneously understands and disavows Katjaa's actions. That is to say, her suicide. It's complicated but sweet. It shows that Kenny's grown since their death, and that he's much more willing to move on from this tragedy despite how much it's affected him. Still, we can't stay here too long. Lee is on borrowed time, and it's clear by now that he's not getting any better. The group manages to find a way out of the apartment by jumping across from the metal porch railing. Unfortunately, this railing isn't strong enough to hold everybody's weight. Right as Ben tries to make the jump, the railing falls apart and he falls into the alleyway below. Kenny immediately rushes in to see if they can pick up Ben. Lee follows short behind. Ben's alive, thank goodness, but he's been completely punctured by the metal railing that just fell apart. There is just no way we can get him out of here without carrying the railing with him, which just isn't physically possible. At the same time, Ben's screaming and wailing is attracting the attention of walkers nearby. Any moment now, they'll swarm in and eat the group alive. Kenny makes the quick decision to lock Lee out of the alleyway. It's time for him to make the sacrifice play. He mercy kills Ben to avoid him of the fate that he's so terrified, to be eaten alive by zombies. Kenny disappears into the walker horde, and we overhear the sounds of death as the walkers rip and tear the corpses of whoever was in that hallway.
Back, you sons of bitches! Yeah! Ah, damn it, Kenny! Oh, fuck! Kenny, please!
If Ben died in episode 4, we get a slightly different scene where Christa jumps down into the hallway to pick up Lee's walkie-talkie that he dropped. Kenny sacrifices himself to boost her up, similarly caught by the walker horde. The implications are totally different here, though. Kenny knew full well that Christa was pregnant and is likewise just as willing to go down and help her live. I'm being intentionally vague here because the game left it that way. Season 2 reveals the outcome of this moment, but if you were to stop playing Walking Dead games right here and there, this moment concludes the long journey of Ben and Kenny.
Ben was really messed up. Kenny couldn't leave him, and it was just fucked.
Most players will feel some sort of affinity to Kenny being the only character besides Lee and Clementine who's made it all the way to episode 5 since the very beginning. And, Kenny's been with you since day one. If he's with you right now, this means that Kenny and Lee have remained loyal to each other through thick and thin, highs and lows, life and death. I love their friendship, but more than anything, I love how flawed that friendship is, and I love how flawed Kenny is. I mentioned earlier how Lee can end up with a totally different relationship with Kenny depending on your choices. The same applies to Clementine, but none of this applies to Ben, Christa, Omid, Lily, Vernon, Duck, Katja, Carly, Larry, or Glenn. Yeah, remember Glenn? All of these characters treat Lee pretty much the same way until the end of their appearances. Lee himself treats them pretty consistently across your various choices. With Kenny, though, it feels significantly more dynamic. It feels more dynamic than even Lee and Clementine. But that's only because Lee and Clementine wouldn't make any sense if the relationship could be any different. Kenny can ditch Lee in his search for Clementine. Lee can side with him when it comes to the boat, to Duck, to Larry, to a lot of things. Kenny can be a constant throughout your adventure, or he can be a significantly lesser part of it, all owed to your choices. It's for that reason that not only can your in-game Kenny and Lee feel differently towards each other, but maybe you as the player could have a totally different opinion on Kenny depending on your choices, which directly affect his choices. Depending on some of those choices, Kenny could have your back throughout the game. Now I'm dedicated to having his back whenever possible. Come Season 2, when Brother makes a whole comeback, Season 1 will be fresh on your mind when you need to make some very difficult decisions. How strong was your connection to Kenny in Season 1? That entire question could determine your ending in Season 2. Just that alone, from a game design perspective, is pretty cool. It ties these two games together more than any of the other seasons in the franchise. After this Kenny fiasco, Lee has to break the news to Christa and Omid. We've now lost 2 more members of the team. Holy moly. Lee tells the both of them that he'll tank any risky actions, since he's pretty much on death's door. His skin turns significantly paler after the scene, and he's visibly weaker than he seemed before, with or without his arm cut off. The group makes their way to the pier where the hotel holding Clem's parents is located. Pause. Are you telling me that the hotel we've been looking for was on the way to the pier? This is the exact same pier where we found Molly in, the one that Clem walked to all by herself? I'm being disingenuous. Chances are Telltale used the same pier setting for the hotel location, but they're geographically different places. Still, it'd be a bit ridiculous if all we had to do was walk into this hotel real quick, check if Clem's parents are here, 1 episode ago. Then, Lee wouldn't have gotten bitten, Ben would still be alive, Vernon and his crew wouldn't have stolen a boat, and you get the picture. A lot of pain and anguish avoided if we'd just taken a quick detour with a Clementine an episode ago. But, whatever, benefit of the doubt. While trying to make it across the pier sign, pause! This is the same pier! The sign falls off, and Lee is separated from Christa and Omid. Lee tells the both of them to dip. Lee will deliver Clementine to them later. They agree to go separate ways. This is the last time Lee will ever see Christa and Omid. Since Lee's already bitten and clearly dying, he decides to charge into the walker horde and enter the hotel through the front entrance. You get a cool sequence with Lee charging into the street filled with walkers. Even with one arm, he fucks up quite a lot of the walkers and is just an all-around badass. Somehow, he doesn't even get bitten in this sequence, nor do any of the walkers pay any mind to him as he does walk in. Lee makes his way into the hotel, and somehow finds the right room where Clementine should be at. I don't know how the fuck Lee walks into the exact right floor, into the exact right room. I may have missed some sort of dialogue here, but I'm pretty sure he just magically finds the right one. Whatever. Soon enough, he's met face first with the man only known as the Stranger. This mysterious stalker is the primary person responsible for the kidnapping of Clementine, and he's been guiding her here since episode 3, but we don't really know why. We found out here that the Stranger was the owner of that stagecoach from episode 2, the abandoned car that Kenny and the rest of the people looted. It didn't matter if you chose to loot it or not, though it does get brought up here. The Stranger will still hold you hostage and promise to kill you. The Stranger used to have a family, but when his car was looted, his wife and son died from the starvation. He still keeps the head of his wife in a purse to talk to. This entire sequence is a culmination of all the players' choices. The Stranger recounts all the different times Lee failed as a leader, as a parent, and now he's here to let you make amends, to willingly hand over Clementine and then die by his hands, as some sort of divine punishment or something. This character reminds me a lot of Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. The way he talks and abstracts and judges you as a sort of unstoppable force, a third party. He's a psycho for sure, but you can argue that your group's choices caused this guy to be psycho, and now it's biting you in the ass. The whole sequence is eerie too, with this white noise in the background maintaining the tenseful nature of the whole scene.
Hurt somebody you care about?
Yes, of course.
Who?
My wife.
Freaky. Lee's not having any of this, and neither is Clementine, who cleaves the fuck out of the Stranger when sneaking right behind him. Lee and the Stranger wrestle for a bit, and you get the choice to kill or spare him. Killing him does just that, while sparing him forces Clementine to take her first human life. What the Stranger dealt with, Clementine and Lee are finally reunited, but only for a while. Lee's symptoms are getting worse and worse, and if he doesn't deliver Clem to Christa and Omid, he's going to die before Clementine can leave this walker-infested city. While trying to make your way out of the room, a walker wanders in, but seems to completely ignore Lee? What the? We're in the next to last section of the last episode of the first season of The Walking Dead, and it's here where we see another major rule in The Walking Dead fiction. In The Walking Dead world, dying by any means other than the damage to the brain revives you as a zombie. In The Walking Dead world, sound attracts walkers. They can see you, but if they don't, you can easily manipulate them using sound. In The Walking Dead world, if you smell like a zombie, then you're invisible to them. Covering yourself in zombie gunk, which is just what Lee did when he was rampaging through the hotel, helped camouflage his scent to all the other walkers, which is why this one right here is hardly paying any mind to him, and also why none of them followed him into the hotel when Lee stormed in. The first few walkers sprayed all over him, and the rest were just fun extra kills. Lee picks up on this pretty quickly. If we want to get out of here, we're going to need to cover Clementine and zombie gore too. We do just that, and it lets us walk out into the open scot-free. Lee's symptoms have reached a melting point, though. All the while, Clementine spots the two figures she's been looking for this whole time, both her parents, turned into zombies. Right as she sees this, Lee passes out in the middle of the horde. Talk about bad timing. Somehow, little old Clementine is able to pull Lee into a store nearby. She locks the door and Lee panics, knowing full well what could happen if he does die right here and there. Locked in with Clementine. They find an exit, but the infection has just gone too far at this point. Clementine needs to make the escape on her own. Lee helps guide Clementine into opening the locked door and stealing the keys from this walker. Unfortunately, you can't tell her to pick up the bat and whack the zombie before doing any of this, so she gets jumped by the walker as she tries to steal the keys. In a final little scare, you help kick the bat over to Clementine and she proceeds to lay waste to the zombie. Alright, here we go. With the walker threat gone, an exit clear in sight, and Lee strapped to a heater minutes away from death, The Walking Dead treats us to one of the most emotional conclusions to a story ever told in the video game format. Clementine's anguish as she realizes she'll be leaving the store alone is gut-wrenching. It's viscerally difficult to not only empathize with Lee's death, but to also have been so close for so long and now having to say goodbye. we're not just crying because Lee died, but because separating Lee and Clem forever is just too much to bear, given everything they've both went through this whole game. It really is an intense scene. The final choice of the game is presented here. You can pressure Clementine into either letting you live or preventing you from turning, aka putting Lee to rest. I teased this earlier with the duck question. I didn't have the heart to press a button on this scene the first time I played this game. Neither of these choices felt right. Not because of poor writing by any means, but because either of these outcomes felt really, really fucked up. I let the game play itself. See how my choices formed the Clementine standing right before me. I thought that, in this moment, despite my many mistakes, questionable leadership decisions, and the occasional murder, that I had taught Clementine that even in this horrible, fucked up world, all we have is ourselves. Each other. If we can't save ourselves, then we can't save the ones we love. My Clementine couldn't kill Lee. She couldn't pull the trigger on the man that saved her from the treehouse a few months before. The man who saved her from eating human meat. The man who was merciful, supportive. The man who walked through sewage and human remains just to see Clementine to safety. That Clementine who'd already had her heart broken far too often throughout the game could not put down the person who'd become her surrogate father. And I thought that was the most incredible way to finish this game. To think that this computer code program could instill this much emotional impact was just incredible. I had never cried out of any video game before The Walking Dead. The only moment in the entire franchise where I bawled my eyes out was... Actually, not in this season, surprisingly enough. Don't get me wrong, I could feel my tear ducts about to burst. If someone had barged into my room while I was playing this game, it might have all just come out flowing. But part of me knew that this had to happen, that this was going to happen. So I didn't cry at the end of The Walking Dead, but something inside me broke nonetheless.
Go.
The game ends right here, as Lee gives Clementine some parting words, and then black. Game's over. I looked into the reflection of my monitor, pure pitch black, and I could see my most depressed looking reflection I'd ever seen after playing a video game. My God, what did this game just do to me? How is it possible for a game to affect me in such a way? Jesus! And yet it did. The Walking Dead was the first video game I ever played that showed me that games could be more than just shooty McShooty, high scores, and combo breakers. It showed me that being part of the story can be infinitely more effective at making me relate to the events, to the characters, than any book or song ever could. Fuck the Oscars, you know? Fuck the Oscars! The Walking Dead franchise, including the shows and comics, have always been about the real monsters of the zombie apocalypse. The few people that survive it, and the horrible things they need to see and do to be able to make it as far as they can. The Walking Dead game, Season 1 edition, might initially trick you into thinking that this game is about how you protect an innocent girl from the horrors of the real world. But it isn't. It's not about shielding her from the real world, it's about saving yourself from becoming a monster. Clementine evolves into a hardened, stone-cold killer in the next few games. She is not the frail little girl she is in her first game. She does, however, keep her humanity, her morals, and her willingness to look out for someone else against all odds because of Lee. The Stranger, Vernon, Chuck, Jolene, Hershel, all of these characters show up in this game specifically to wedge Clementine from Lee. All of these characters judge you for your leadership, your parenting, your morality, your ability as a father. They don't see you as the best protector for Clementine, partly because of reasons outside your control, and partly because you're just not her real father. This all culminates with the final conversation with the Stranger. Even Lee's past gets brought up in this scene. We finally find out what happened to Lee's wife, why he killed that senator, and what kind of person he wanted to be before this all went to shit. Lee confesses that his relationship to his wife was already in disrepair long before the murder. He wanted to start a family with her, but she was completely career-focused and driven. It's ironic then that Lee finally gets a family after the world falls apart. He finds this family in Kenny, in Ben, in Christa, but most of all in Clementine. Lee doesn't save Clementine in The Walking Dead. Clementine saves Lee. When they first meet, it's Clementine that gives Lee the hammer to fight off the babysitter. When Lee, Kenny, and Lily are trapped in a room with a dead Larry, it's Clementine that's able to crawl through the AC to get the group out. Clementine stops Molly from wedging an ice pick into Lee's face, and Clementine distracts the Stranger in order for Lee to take over. But most of all, Clementine saves Lee From himself, a dejected history school teacher, fresh from the betrayal of his own wife, is now suddenly given a ray of hope in the form of little old Clementine. And against all odds, he saves her too. Damn.
Me too.
The Walking Dead, The Last of Us, God of War, BioShock Infinite. The most significant thing these games have in common is the parent-child relationship that anchors the core of their stories. Hence the name, Daddy Game. I'm not here to argue about which one does what better. I think each of them have their own qualities that let them stand apart from the rest. I think God of War, for instance, has the best sense of scale and epicness, a story of gods and monsters that manages to temper its ferocity with genuine moments of one-to-one passion. This is an achievement. The Last of Us, which has probably garnered the most acclaim out of all these games, better humanized our two protagonists, giving them much more realistic drives, personalities, and characterization through some top-tier writing, animations, and performances. BioShock Infinite. Sure, it's the weakest of the bunch in terms of narrative cohesion. Seriously, if you came out of BioShock Infinite understanding what the fuck Elizabeth was talking about, I salute you, Blood. I needed a 30-minute long YouTube explanation on 0.5 speed to catch up to what was going on. I'll give it this. It's at least the most original of the group. Columbia and its personalities and ideologies felt so much more interesting to explore and understand than your typical Norse mythology or zombie setting. None of these games try to send a political message quite like BioShock does, but it comes at the expense of the interpersonal side of the story. The other three games really succeed in telling that part of the story. What did The Walking Dead do so different to stand out? This might seem paradoxical given the nature of this video, but it's the choices. I went on a tirade about how the choices don't matter, but it turns out that the choices are what made this game so much more effective at connecting me with the characters. The Walking Dead isn't the game with the most gameplay, the most action, nor the most story, but it does have the most player agency when it comes to that story. By nature of the genre, sure, adventure games are inherently more story-focused, but I hope that by watching this video you've also seen how the constant loop of choices and feedback allow the player to directly become Lee. That's the key here. I've made it a point to highlight how often your choices fail to impact the outcome of the story, but I have to stress that the game is effective at making you become Lee, and making you feel like Lee. 3 hours into The Walking Dead, I was fighting for my life to save Clementine from cannibalizing human meat. 20 hours into The Last of Us, I felt those same emotions, that visceral reaction when Ellie was about to die in the hospital. Yet The Walking Dead got me to this emotional overdrive so much faster than The Last of Us did. And there was still another 60% of the game left to go, not to mention that tearjerker of an ending. It's for all these reasons, the choices, the characters, the story, and that comic book veneer that the whole game is wrapped in, that The Walking Dead easily becomes my favorite out of all the Daddy games, and one of my favorite stories in gaming in all of ever. It's the Daddy game to the Daddy games, but also just a fantastic video game, confident in its own ability to reel you in, care for characters in a way you never think possible, and just be a whole lot of fun. Oscars, eat your heart out.
Fuck the Oscars!
Okay, that concludes my Walking Dead Presentation 101 class. I hope that 200-hour plot summary was at least a little entertaining. You don't have to stay for this next part. I've kind of just added sort of a reflection, all improv on y'all's asses. For myself, for the most part, to think about what worked and what didn't. Honestly, I didn't expect this video to be 2 hours long. I kind of intended it to be more about 30 minutes long, summarizing The Walking Dead Season 1 and just kind of jumping on the moments and themes that really, really hit. Instead, I took 2 hours to mostly repeat the story that you already know and have watched 200 times over. I'll admit, it's probably a little excessive. I wanted to make a series out of this, cover all the major franchises, all the major seasons, maybe even some of the DLC, but I think for the next few videos, I'm just going to limit the plot summary and focus more on what stood out. I'm thinking the reason why it took so long was probably because since it's such a story-driven game and you kind of need to set up some of the points, you kind of have to go through the story. or else the points I'm trying to make no sense. You know, for those out there that have never played the games or who don't care for playing a game that's 12 years old, right? Might be necessary to go through the whole game line by line. There's a lot I didn't get to, you know, some of it intentional. I really didn't get a chance to elaborate on Kenny or Clementine, but that was mostly intentional because, you know, there's going to be a lot of room for Clementine in the rest of the seasons and a lot more room for Kenny in season 2. But I also didn't get to some stuff that I wish I'd included, like more of the creative stuff, you know, artistic design, sound design, score, stuff like that is still important to me, but I just didn't get a chance to really hit on those, and I didn't want to make the video any longer than I need it to be, and even though I do care about those things, I'll be the first to admit, actually, that I don't know jack shit about music or art design. I just know it when I see it, you know? I also wish I'd included more context on Telltale. You know, the story of Telltale is almost just as interesting as the games themselves. But I didn't really want to make the video about them. There's plenty of that to find on the internet. The development of the game, kind of making more points about what worked and what had to be cut. There were a lot of cuts. I didn't do too much research, but I realized as I was playing it that there was just straight up tons and tons of material and recorded lines that were just not in the full game, right? Like Lee's flashbacks and his relationship with the senator and all that good stuff. That kind of just gets canceled in the first episode, and it's really interesting that it just kind of nix it. You know, it's gone for good. But there was supposed to be something there about that relationship with Lee's wife and how that kind of comes back to bite him towards the end of the game. It kind of haunts him, but yeah, I didn't really get a chance to talk about it. So moving on. For the 2 people that are watching this, please let me know how I did. I really think that I deserve to be roasted. This video is not great. I wouldn't even say it's good. You know, I wouldn't even say it's aight. So please roast me. I value and appreciate all feedback. Preferably the bad kind because that's the one that stings and it gets you going. But, you know, if you want to be nice, you know, leave a like and subscribe. You know, that's what the YouTubers say, right? Just go ahead and do that. This isn't a business, though. Trust me, I do this 100% on my free time, for fun, for myself. So if you want to kind of use my video for your own content, you know, want to grab some Walking Dead gameplay, please do. 90% of this video is stolen anyway. The video, not the writing. I have not plagiarized anyone, trust me. But I will admit that sometimes I'd grab like gameplay from trailers or something, just because I don't own like BioShock Infinite anymore. I sold my Xbox years ago, okay? Help. In any case, I'll catch y'all hopefully on the Season 2 video. That game's going to be a little bit more bumpy. I played that game a long time ago. I did not play it in anticipation of this video. Kind of went off memory for the rest of the game, so I'll be replaying that second game to get a better context for it. And maybe have more to say about the first game in comparison to this one, but yeah, I haven't really heard great things about the way that game ends. But I remember it fondly. I remember it being pretty good, so we'll see. In any case, thanks, y'all. I'm about to yabba dabba do. All right, let's get out of